Chapter 409. The second floor of Wuxia building was filled with broken tables, chairs, and broken porcelain. Zhao Ling, her side had many people and many blades, but at this moment, they were abnormally nervous. The red-clothed youth in front of them was a bit too strong. It was no longer something that could be solved with many people and blades. A hairpin was in the hands of the red-clothed youth, but no one dared to take it. Expert, concubine Chao Tianji asks for guidance. At this moment, a ray of light flashed and entered the battle. A 3-foot-long sword swallowed the red-clothed youth like a poisonous snake. With a clang, the silver hairpin blocked the sword. Before they could even turn their eyes, another extraordinary figure appeared, joining hands to fight knowing destiny. Father. Seeing the man appear beside her, Zhao Ling, was startled and bowed. Watch the battle first. The city lord of Swallow Song said calmly. Concubine Chao Tianji and Bai Shaoran, the two strongest generals under the city lord of Swallow Song, were joining hands to fight knowing destiny. Xin Liangchen grabbed Jia Qi's arm and retreated to the side. He looked at the city lord of Swallow Song, who had appeared in Wuxia building. His expression became heavy. Even a relative of the imperial family had come. It seemed that today's matter was more complicated than he had imagined. In one battle, two swords were so extraordinary. Every move and style was the pinnacle of strength. On the other hand, the red-clothed youth in the sword stepped on flowing light and swam among the sword shadows. The sword didn't touch his body, which shocked everyone present. The city lord's expression froze. What a powerful youth. Concubine Chao Tianji and Bai Shaoran couldn't even test his strength. This is a meaningless battle. Stop. Ning Chen stopped in his tracks. The silver hairpin in his hand stopped the wind and clouds. With a clanging sound, two swords and two shadows were sent flying out of the room. The battle stopped. Concubine Chao Tianji and Bai Shaoran retreated several steps. After stabilizing themselves, they didn't attack again. They knew that the youth in front of them had already held back. If they continued to force him, it would be unwise. I am the city lord of Swallow Song. May I ask for your name? The city lord walked out and asked seriously. I wouldn't dare to ask for your name. I am Ning Chen. Greetings, city lord, Ning Chen said politely. Ah, heroes come from the young. Since we're fortunate enough to meet, why don't you come to my residence? The city lord invited. City lord is too kind. It's just that it's getting late. I'll definitely pay you a visit another day, Ning Chen said with a smile. In that case, this Zhao will wait for little brother Ning in the mansion. City lord Yan Gu responded. Then, he glanced at the group of people behind him and said indifferently, let's go. After saying that, everyone left. Before they left, they looked at the red-clothed young man with dread in their eyes. Since when did such a terrifying figure appear in Swallow Song City? No one could figure him out. He was probably on par with the young geniuses from the eastern border. Princess, I'll return the hairpin to you. Ning Chen waved his hand, and the hairpin flew out towards Zhao Ling, who was about to leave. Zhao Ling, stopped and smiled. Then, with a wave of her delicate hand, she sent the hairpin back. I'll leave it to young master as a souvenir. The beautiful figure gradually disappeared into the distance, leaving behind her final words. The hairpin in his hand was exceptionally cold. Brother Ning, this vicious and merciless princess seems to have taken a fancy to you. Eldest young master Xin came over and said with a smile. Oh, I don't know if she likes me or not, but I do know that you're in big trouble right now. Ning Chen handed the hairpin to Ruo Shi, then looked at eldest young master Xin and said with a slight smile. Xin Liangchen smiled bitterly. This unprovoked disaster came too suddenly. He rarely had any dealings with the Zhao family and had never offended this princess. Today's matter was too outrageous. Ning Chen guessed a few things, but he didn't say anything. Today's martial arts show, whether it was true or not, the result would soon be clear. Eldest young Master Xian arranged the follow-up arrangements for Lu Xianlu. Then, he sent someone to send Miss Jieqi back. His calm mind was very different from the usual spoiled brat. By the time everything was settled, the sun was already setting in the west. Eldest young Master Xian looked apologetically at Ning Chen, who was sitting on the first floor and drinking tea. "Brother Ning, I'm sorry to have kept you waiting." It wasn't a long wait. The tea was good, so it was worth it. Ning Chen got up and put down the tea in his hand. Next, he would have to face the real master of the Xian family. Visiting someone else's house, it would be unreasonable to not pay a visit. With eldest young Master Xian leading the way, the three set off for the Xian mansion. Today's big commotion must have been received by the Xian family. Once they return, there will be a lot of excitement. Along the way, no one knew what eldest young Master Xian was thinking. His eyebrows were heavy with worry. Perhaps he was worried about the consequences of today's matter. Since ancient times, merchants have never fought with officials. It's just that Zhao Ling was too much of a bully. At the entrance of the Xian mansion, as soon as the three stepped through the gate, a servant quickly came over and respectfully bowed. "Second young master, the lord is holding a banquet in the back hall. You're the only one waiting for you." "I know, I'll go there now." Eldest young Master Xian's face showed a smile again. When the servant received the news, he bowed again and immediately turned to leave. In the back hall, the lord of the Xian family was holding a banquet. Sitting down were more than a dozen figures, all of whom were direct descendants of the Xian family. Everyone was silent with different thoughts, waiting for the same person. Not long after, Xian Liangchen walked into the hall. Behind him, a young man in red followed with a maid. In an instant, he became the focus of everyone. "Liangchen greets father." Xian Liangchen bowed respectfully. "I am Ning Chen. Greetings to the lord of the Xian family." Ning Chen's mouth showed an incomprehensible smile as he cupped his hands and bowed. "Your presence brings light to the Xian family's humble dwelling." "Liangchen, lead the guests to their seats," said the lord of the Xian family. "Yes." Xian Liangchen straightened up and led Ning Chen to the seats on the left. The seating arrangements of the Xian family were very particular. Every seat was fixed. Xian Liangchen and his mother's seats were basically at the end of the table. In a large aristocratic family, the difference in birth was always an insurmountable gap. There were several elders of the Xian family and the branch of the Xian family sitting in order. Among them, there was a young man with a slightly pale face who was particularly eye-catching. He wore a light blue brocade robe and was quiet and dignified. He was the eldest son of the Xian family, Xian Hongwen. Ning Chen glanced at the people seated. After pausing for a moment on the lord of the Xian family and the eldest son of the Xian family, he immediately looked away and did not look at them anymore. "Liangchen, you have made great contributions to the development of the Xian family in these 4 trips to the eastern region. Do you have any requests? I will definitely satisfy them." The lord of the Xian family did not mention the conflict at Lucien restaurant at all. Instead, he changed the topic to rewards. There was a rare smile on his dignified face as he spoke. "What I have done is what I should do. I dare not make any more requests." Xian Liangchen stood up and said respectfully. "You should be rewarded for your contributions. The west loft where you and your mother live should also be repaired. How about this? Third brother, you give the empty Donghua pavilion to Liangchen and his mother to live in." The lord of the Xian family looked away and said calmly. Below the seat, a middle-aged man frowned when he heard this. However, he did not dare to disobey the lord of the Xian family. He stood up and said, "It's all up to you." "Ha! During the banquet, Ning Chen chuckled. Such an arrangement was meaningful. Xin Liangchen wanted to refuse, but was stopped by the lord of the Xin family. He said, "No need to say more. This is what you and your mother deserve. Liangchen, why don't you thank your father?" On the side, a delicate woman with a delicate face showed joy on her face and reminded softly. Xin Liangchen sighed in his heart. Knowing that he could no longer object, he respectfully replied, "Thank you, father." The atmosphere at the banquet was much better than expected. At least on the surface, the father was kind, the son was filial, and the brothers were respectful. Each branch also got along well with each other. There was no hidden sarcasm. Every time the lord of the Xin family asked, Ning Chen would politely reply with a few words. As for whether it was true or not, no one knew. At the end of the banquet, the lord of the Xin family seemed to finally remember what happened at Lucien restaurant today. After a brief inquiry, he did not say much. After a few words of comfort, he did not continue. In the usual and harmonious family banquet, everyone played their role. Before the big interests were affected, no one would fall out face to face. When the moon was high in the east, the banquet ended and each branch returned. Ning Chen was arranged to stay in a guest room not far from the Xin family's residence. As usual, Ruo Shi accompanied him to take care of his daily life. "Young master, this lord of the Xin family seems to be good to young master Xin." Ruo Shi said casually while tidying up the room. "Perhaps." Ning Chen recovered from his thoughts and responded. Ruo Shi heard the hidden meaning in her young master's words. Puzzled, she asked, "Did Ruo Shi see wrongly?" Ruo Shi didn't see wrongly. It's just that there are too many sides to a person. Ruo Shi has a kind heart, so she sees the good side. Ning Chen replied. Young master is also a good person. It's just that young master is smarter than Ruo Shi. That's why you see more than Ruo Shi. Ruo Shi whispered. Ha! Ning Chen smiled. In the end, she was still his maid. No matter what, she would always think her young master was the best. The candlelight flickered, reflecting a charming face. After tidying up the room, Ruo Shi returned to her room to rest. Her young master liked peace and quiet. At this time, she couldn't disturb him anymore. The night was deep and the moon was cold. In the room, the candlelight illuminated the red dress. It was slightly dazzling. In the quiet of the night, it always made one's mind too clear. But at the same time, it also made one more able to experience pain. Ning Chen got up, pushed open the door, and came outside. Looking at the moon in the sky, his eyes flashed with a trace of emotion. Even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its cubs. The human heart was so terrible. Perhaps, he never understood this cold and heartless human heart. In the city lord's mansion, the city lord of Swallow Song looked at the secret letter on the table. His eyes flashed. He didn't expect the second young master of the Xin family to have made friends with such an extraordinary young powerhouse. It seems that he can't touch the second young master again before finding out his true ability and purpose. Father. Zhao Ling walked over and respectfully said. Has the letter been sent? The city lord asked. Yes, their people should be here soon. Zhao Ling replied. Ling you must be prepared for both eventualities. If the person they send fails, then this young man can't be provoked anymore. Try your best to win him over. The city lord slowly said. Father, don't worry. The person who's sent this time is a top powerhouse from the sect of life extermination, Hong Wulei. It's impossible for him to fail. Zhao Ling calmly said. I hope so. The city lord narrowed his eyes. Chapter 410. In the Xin residence, the city lord of Swallow Song City sent an invitation to the second young master and Ning Chen to the city lord's mansion. He didn't mention the previous incident at 6NB restaurant. When the lord of the Xian residence saw the invitation, he didn't say anything and directly sent it to the West Pavilion. In the West Pavilion, Xian Liangchen saw the invitation and immediately got up and walked towards the guest room. This Swallow Song city lord is really an impatient person. In the guest room, Ning Chen casually glanced at the invitation card handed over by young master Xian and slowly said, "Brother Ning's strength is outstanding, Liangchen has benefited a lot from it." Xian Liangchen smiled. "For you, it's hard to say whether it's a blessing or a curse." Ning Chen told the truth. That day, if it wasn't for that princess surnamed Zhao being so ruthless, he really didn't plan to make a move. After the incident at 6NB restaurant, if anyone wanted to make a move against Xian Liangchen in the future, they would have to use a completely different level of power than before. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it's unavoidable. Since someone is inviting, it's not a waste to not go. Xian Liangchen said freely. That makes sense. Ning Chen got up. She walked in from outside the room. She had been busy since dawn, so when she saw her young master was about to go out, she put down the things in her hands and stood there waiting. Seeing this, Ning Chen chuckled and said, She also wants to go. Let's go. After getting permission, She immediately smiled sweetly. Her smile was so bright that it was intoxicating. Xian Liangchen was dazzled by her smile and quickly calmed his mind. This girl is too beautiful, it's better not to think of her as indecent. Not long after, the three left the Xian residence together and walked towards the city lord's mansion to accept the city lord's invitation. The fragrance of flowers drifted in the air as thousands of golden lotuses bloomed in the pond. It was an elegant and extraordinary place for a banquet. Today, the city lord of Swallow Song had invited all the heroes of the world. Talents, beauties, princes, and geniuses gathered to enjoy the rare scene of golden lotuses blooming. Originally, with the status of the Xian family, it was impossible for them to be invited, let alone the second son of a concubine of the Xian family. However, everyone knew that the city lord of Yangu had an ulterior motive. What happened in Lu Xian restaurant a few days ago had already spread to all the big families. Many people came to see who this strange young expert was. They're here. The eyes of a young man in silver robes moved as he spoke. Before he finished speaking, three figures slowly walked over from afar. They were dressed in red, and there was no aura of a cultivator. Every step they took was steady, but there was an indescribable feeling rising in the hearts of the crowd. The rumors are true. This person isn't simple, said one of the disciples. Greetings, city lord. Ning Chen and eldest young master Xian bowed respectfully. You're too polite. Men, bring the two young masters to their seats, said Swallow Song city lord calmly. The maidservant stepped forward and led the two to their seats. They were seated to the right of the silver-clothed youth who had spoken earlier. The scale of the banquet wasn't small. From the looks of it, there were at least 100 people present. Many of the children of aristocratic families had never seen the Xian family's first young master before. Beside each seat, there was a maid kneeling to serve them. However, with Ruoshi's arrival, Ning Chen naturally no longer needed her by his side. The former top courtesan of the Grand Xia imperial city had shed all her glamour and put on light makeup. However, her peerless beauty still made it hard for people to keep their eyes on her. It was difficult for them to control themselves. As for the gazes coming from all directions, Ruoshi didn't care. Her entire heart was focused on her young master. Pouring tea and wine, she never looked at anyone else. To the side, eldest young master Xian was extremely envious. But when he thought of his beautiful lady, he couldn't help but laugh like an idiot. On the main seat, Swallow Song city lord looked at the red-clothed youth. A light flashed in the depths of his eyes. Everyone had a weakness. If this person's weakness was women, then it would be much easier to deal with him. Today, I've invited everyone here to admire the scene of the golden lotus blooming. The second reason is to make friends through martial arts. I presume everyone already knows that the 100 Empire competition is about to begin. My dynasty's imperial emperor has issued a decree a few days ago, ordering each city to quickly select their 3 strongest representatives. For months from now, they will be chosen in front of the Hall of Literature, said Swallow Song's city lord. As soon as his words fell, Swallow Song's city lord looked at everyone present. He was very clear that this was an opportunity that every family valued very much. Even if they couldn't get the qualification to enter the 100 Empire competition, as long as they could get a good ranking in the competition, they would still be rewarded by the imperial emperor. Today's Shu dynasty's city lord was an existence infinitely close to perfect perfection. Sitting on top of the central dragon vein, he sat on top of the dynasty's fortune. His strength didn't lose to any perfect perfection cultivator. If he could get the imperial emperor's recognition, then it would be a great opportunity for him to ascend to the heavens. Of course, not everyone was interested in this. For example, eldest young Master Xian and Ning Chen next to him. Eldest young Master Xian knew he had no chance at all. Ning Chen, on the other hand, was really tired of it. In the past, he had no choice but to fight. He fought for half his life from Hotian to God. Now, he really didn't want to fight anymore. Try it, it tastes really different from the lotus seeds at home. At the banquet, Ning Chen peeled the golden lotus seeds one by one and placed them in front of Ruoxi. Ruoxi picked up one and tasted it. She immediately nodded, it's not quite the same. The taste was cool, sweet, and slightly bitter. However, it wasn't the kind of unbearable bitterness. The sweetness in the bitterness was very unique. If you like it, I'll also bring over eldest young Master Xian's plate. Ning Chen smiled. Although the two's voices were very low, but the eldest young Master Xian on the side also had some martial arts foundation. He heard it clearly. At this moment, his heart was filled with infinite contempt. He finally understood why the phrase, valuing love over friendship, came to be. The person next to him was the best portrayal. The eldest young Master Xian carefully moved his lotus seed plate to the other side. He had a feeling that someone was really capable of doing such a thing. It was better to be on guard. Hearing her young master's words, Ruoxi smiled and said, just try one. How can a girl eat and let her young master serve her? This thing is good for maintaining one's appearance. Ning Chen didn't say much. The corner of his mouth slightly curved, and he directly used his big move. Ruoxi was taken aback. After a slight struggle, she immediately whispered, give it to me. Women, ah. Ning Chen chuckled in his heart. With a flip of his hand, a gentle force swept out. The lotus seeds on the eldest young Master Xian's plate fell from the table and flew into the plate in front of Ruoxi. The eldest young Master Xian was dumbfounded. Can it be like this? Young Master, is this thing really good for maintaining one's appearance? Ruoxi looked at the golden lotus seeds on the plate and confirmed again. Of course, when has your young master ever lied to you? Ning Chen responded. Ruoxi nodded with half belief and half doubt. Young master's words should be trustworthy. On the banquet table, the city lord of Swallow Town and the young masters of the aristocratic families exchanged pleasantries. The atmosphere was very lively. Sitting down, Ning Chen acted as if he didn't hear anything. In any case, he was only here to support the eldest young Master Xian. It wasn't easy to trick his own maid into eating something. As for whether this golden lotus was good for maintaining one's appearance, only the devil would know. Young Master Ning, I heard your skills are good. Why don't you come down and try out your fists and feet? On the opposite side of the banquet table, a slightly immature young man stood up and said. The newborn calf wasn't afraid of the tiger, so he always wanted to let everyone see how different he was. Kind laughter came from the banquet table. This young master wasn't even at the 8th grade natal stage. Challenging such a powerhouse, the gap was indeed too big. The young man's tone was polite, so Ning Chen didn't want to embarrass him. Smiling, he said, "Young master, we are both at the peak of the 7th grade natal stage. I'm certainly not your opponent. Fists and feet have no eyes. It's best not to ruin the banquet's atmosphere." When the young man stood up, he was a little anxious. Now that he heard the praise of a recognized powerhouse, he was so happy that the corners of his eyes almost narrowed into a line. No longer insisting on exchanging pointers, he sat back in his seat in satisfaction. "Nan Mingjin, I can't tell that he's just being perfunctory. He doesn't care about your little skills at all." At this moment, an ear-piercing voice came from the banquet table. Looking towards the source of the voice, a cold-looking young man was drinking from a cup of wine and mocking him. The young man named Nan Mingjin was provoked by the former's words. He immediately stood up and said angrily, "Chu Huaijing, don't try to sow discord here. If you have the ability, come out and fight. We'll see who's the real deal. You're too weak. I'm not interested. Let your brother come." Chu Huaijing was unmoved. Nan Mingjin's face turned red. He was so angry that he couldn't say anything. "As you wish." At this moment, a calm voice came from the distance. Everyone focused. Outside Wenmo Jingluan, a man in golden clothes walked over. He was handsome, but not arrogant. Step by step, he walked into the banquet table. Nanming Tian was a peerless genius from Yangu City's Nanming family. He and Beigong Yu from the Beigong family were called the twin prodigies of Yangu. They were true geniuses. Even in the 100 cities of the Tian Shu dynasty, they were rarely seen. "How dazzling!" murmured Prince Xian to Nanming Tian, who was wearing golden clothes. "Brother!" Nan Mingjin's face lit up with joy. His strongest opponent had appeared. Chu Huaijing's expression turned cold. He stood up and said, "Nan Mingtian, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Water hook sword, please advise me." There was a flash of azure light. Chu Huaijing stood between the two tables and waved his sword. His battle-intent sword. "Golden Dawn, I'll let you understand the etiquette of the sword." Nan Mingtian took a step forward and unsheathed his sword. In an instant, an endless amount of golden light shone out. It was like a rising sun, dazzling people's minds. The young geniuses were going to fight. Everybody was astonished. They also wanted to see how strong one of the twin prodigies of Yangu could be. On his seat, the mayor of Yangu City didn't stop the battle. There were 3 candidates from Yangu City. Of the 2 people in front of him, at least one of them would win. The winner of this battle would determine how high Yangu City could reach in the competition. The swords hummed softly as the 2 swords clashed. With a clang, boundless turbulence was created. Chao Tianji and Bai Shaoran moved to the front of the 2 seats. They activated their true essence to block the scattered shockwaves. In the battle, the golden light was blazing and the water hook sword was condensed. They kept crossing each other. The 2 swords had been opposing each other since they were made. Today, they would finally decide who was stronger and who was weaker. Chapter 411. When Imo and Jingluan, the 2 swords clashed, their sharpness blossoming. These 2 geniuses of the younger generation used the sword to prove their martial prowess. This battle of the peak attracted the attention of everyone present. Nan Mingtian's golden sword was dazzling, like the rising sun, its light illuminating the world. It was a proud sword cultivator, shocking everyone. The hooked water sword was gentle and soft, dispersing the power of the rising sun. An ice-cold chill circulated, opposing each other. The battle between the 2 geniuses was difficult to determine. Every move was top-notch, intoxicating everyone watching. "Brother Ning, who will win?" Xian Chen turned his head and asked, only to find that someone was still focused on peeling the lotus seeds for his maid. He couldn't help but have a headache. Shouldn't masters appreciate each other? How come this brother Ning doesn't seem to be paying attention? I don't know, don't ask me about the fight. Ning Chen didn't raise his head as he put the peeled lotus seeds on the plate in front of Ruoxi. He didn't seem to care about the battle at all. Young Master Ning, is this battle not enough to enter your eyes? At this moment, a silver-robed young man on the left side of the table softly asked. Young Master Beigong's words are too serious. I'm just not interested in fighting, nothing else. Ning Chen put the last lotus seed on the plate and calmly said. Hearing the two words Beigong, young Master Xian looked away in surprise. Could this young man be the other one of the twin prides of Yan and Gu who stood side by side with Nan Mingtian? He had never seen him before, so how did Brother Ning know? Young Master Ning's eyesight is extraordinary, Beigong Yu admires it. But there's something I don't understand. The 100 Dynasties competition is a rare opportunity for every cultivator to prove their martial prowess. If young master has such ability, why don't you want to show it? Beigong Yu sternly asked. I'm tired of it. Everyone has their own ambitions, so I can't force them, right? Ning Chen smiled and replied. Unfortunately, Beigong Yu had always wanted to compete with young Master Ning. It seems I won't have this chance. Beigong Yu sighed with regret. Ha! Ning Chen chuckled and glanced at the two people in the battle. Young Master Beigong, you won't be lonely. Before he finished speaking, the stalemate finally changed. Nan Mingtian's body shone with golden light as the sun rose from his sword. The sun illuminated the 9 heavens and shocked everyone present. With a ping sound, the two swords clashed, and a waterfall of blood sprayed out. Chu Huaijing had been defeated. Thanks for letting me win. Returning Jin Shi to its scabbard, Nan Mingtian turned around and walked to the side of the table. The battle isn't over yet. Where are you going? Right at this moment, the hooked water rose again, streaking across the air like a cold blade, pressing towards his life. Chu Huaijing, you've crossed the line. A silver light flashed as the long and narrow silver blade blocked the hooked water sword radiance. Beigong Yu appeared on the battlefield and said indifferently. Behind Nan Mingtian, Jin Shi paused and turned around to look at the silver-robed young man. Beigong, when shall we fight? Let's talk about it later. Right now, I want to fight with that young Master Ning. You have to line up. Beigong Yu's silver blade moved, forcing Chu Huaijing back. Nan Mingtian looked over at the red-robed young man and nodded. He really is an expert. However, it won't be easy for you to get what you want. The red-robed young man no longer had any battle intent. It was clear that he hadn't truly fought in a long time. People who liked to fight but didn't like to fight were the hardest to challenge. Let's leave it to fate. Didn't you go to the Sea God Palace at the bottom of the South Sea? Why did you come back so quickly? I ran into a peak sword expert. I couldn't get past him, so I came back. Nan Mingtian didn't hide anything. Oh. Even you couldn't get past him? It seems the Sea God Palace is even more mysterious than we thought, said Beigong Yu gravely. The two most dazzling heavenly geniuses of Swallow Song City chatted as they returned to their seats. Chu Huaijing's expression changed again and again. He snorted coldly and suppressed his urge to attack again. He returned to his seat. Brother. Seeing his brother return, Nan Mingtian was in an extremely good mood. Little brother, don't always be so impetuous. Before, young Master Ning didn't care about your impudence because you were young. But with your little bit of cultivation, you still dare to challenge him without knowing your limits, lectured Nan Mingtian. I know I was wrong, Nan Mingtian said in a low voice with a bitter expression after being reprimanded. This interlude didn't affect the atmosphere of the banquet. 1,000 lotuses bloomed, and the beautiful scenery was intoxicating. Talented women played zither and beautiful women danced, making the banquet even livelier. Just at this moment, an arrow shot through the air. It was silent and sharp, and it was aimed directly at young Master Xian. Everyone's expressions changed. They were all startled by this arrow. However, whether or not they wanted to help, it was already too late. In that moment of crisis, the red-robed young man flashed over and blocked the arrow with his finger. The black arrow shattered. What shocking reaction speed! Nan Mingtian and Bei Gongyu narrowed their eyes. They took him even more seriously. On the main seat, Swallow Song City's city lord's eyes flashed. Had it begun? After one arrow failed, the attacker quickly retreated without any hesitation. From beginning to end, he didn't leave a trace. Men, chase after him, said the city lord. Yes. One soldier after another came out and quickly chased after one Imo Jingluan. That was close. During the banquet, eldest young Master Xian wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. Just now, he thought he was dead for sure. In front of him, Ning Chen looked in the direction the aura had disappeared. His eyes flashed coldly. He was very clear that this arrow had most likely been aimed at him. Young Master Xian had only been dragged down by him. City Lord, I suddenly remembered that I still have something important to do, so I won't disturb you any longer. I'll take my leave first. Ning Chen turned around and cupped his fists towards the city lord of Yangu, who was seated on the main seat, before he excused himself. Young Master Xian was startled. When he recovered, he also stood up. If Brother Ning left, there was no point in him staying. Swallow Song City's city lord nodded. Since little Brother Ning has something to do, then I won't stay any longer. See you later. See you later. Ning Chen replied. Then, he led the two people by his side and left. Do you want to see what's going on? Bei Gongyu looked at Nan Mingtian and transmitted his voice to him. Not interested, said Nan Mingtian indifferently. Heh, with your personality, you won't have any friends, Bei Gongyu chuckled. Nan Mingtian didn't reply. He drank the wine in his cup and pondered. Outside when Imo, Ning Chen took the two back the way they came. After a while, a cold wind suddenly blew on a deserted street. It was bone-chilling. She's finally here. Ning Chen stopped and said softly as he looked ahead. At the end of the street, white mist filled the air. A reddish-brown figure slowly walked over. On the blade, a bell rang. It was like the sound of the Yellow Springs. The newcomer was the top assassin of the Yu Luo life extermination sect, Hong Wulei. Her beautiful face was emotionless like a machine. She was the most ruthless assassin. Today, she blocked the path to knowing Destiny State. Without saying anything, the reddish-brown figure disappeared. When she reappeared, she was already in front of the three people. Her cold blade flashed and chased after their souls. With a clang, Ning Chen blocked the blade with his sword. Looking at the woman in front of him, Ning Chen frowned and said, "Who sent you? The Xian family or the city lord of Yangu?" Hearing this, young Master Xian's heart sank. What's going on? Hong Wulei didn't answer. She turned her blade and slashed. The blade was fast and extremely tricky. She had never seen such a strange martial art before. It was difficult to catch her movements. Ning Chen still didn't use his sword. He condensed Yuan into a sword with his two fingers. He fought speed with speed and strangeness with strangeness. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen moves were exchanged. The blade and the sword collided. Hong Wulei, who was as still as a mountain, didn't move at all. Hong Wulei also saw that the person in front of her was extraordinary. She took a step and jumped into the air. She drew the spiritual chi of heaven and earth to her body and turned it into thousands of blade lights. Clang! With a soft sound, two fingers met the blade. It was an unbelievable scene. The deadly blade was completely restrained. It couldn't move half a step. What an amazing power control. It seems that our evaluation of him is low again. Outside the battle, two figures appeared. In the end, it was Bei Gongyu who persuaded Nan Mingtian to join them. Extraordinary warrior. Nan Mingtian nodded. This person's strength was beyond their expectations. In the battle, Hong Wulei saw the two fingers holding the blade. Her left hand moved, and a short blade appeared. She slashed at Ning Chen's throat. Ning Chen's expression didn't change. He flicked the blade and leaned to the side to avoid the short blade. "Aren't you worried?" Young Master Xian looked at the unusually calm woman beside him and was puzzled. This master and servant, one was more strange than the other. How big of a heart did they have to be indifferent to the situation in front of them? "It's just a small matter." Ruo Shi replied softly. Compared to the monsters that appeared in the divine great land in the past, this small matter was not even a trouble. "Back off." The sword came again. Ning Chen didn't want to fight anymore. Sword intent spread out from his fingers, and the woman in front of him retreated. Hong Wulei's eyes narrowed. She no longer needlessly attacked. She moved her feet and quickly retreated. "You let her go so easily." Young Master Xian was surprised. "Young Master is a good person. He doesn't kill." "Ruo," she said. "It's getting late. Let's go back." Ning Chen glanced at Duan Feng on the ground and memorized the words Yu Luo extermination. N. Ruo Shi followed and walked forward together. Young Master Xian also smacked his lips. He didn't take trouble seriously at all. His dog shit luck was really good. He randomly picked up a person who turned out to be such a powerful expert. After the three left, Nan Mingtian and Bei Gongyu walked out. When they saw the four words engraved on the broken blade, their eyes flashed. It was actually them. "Nan Mingtian, if it were you facing that woman, could you do it without moving a step?" Bei Gongyu asked solemnly. "I can't." Nan Mingtian honestly said. The woman just now wasn't weak. Her moves were tricky and ruthless. He could retreat, but he couldn't do it without moving a step. "Oh, I can't do it either. It seems this young Master Ning's control of power has reached an unimaginable level. I want to fight with him more and more." Bei Gongyu couldn't hide the hope in his eyes. It would be a pity if such a powerhouse was missing on the road ahead. Chapter 412. In the Xian family's study, the candlelight flickered, illuminating two figures. They sat across from each other, calm and tranquil. The Xian family's head and Ning Chen were people who shouldn't have interacted with each other. But because of the Xian family's second young master's existence, they sat across from each other. They were polite and courteous, just like ordinary seniors and juniors. The tea was very hot and steam rose up, blurring the already blurry vision. The study's silence gradually became abnormal, but it was hard to say what was wrong. "I heard from Liangchen that it was nephew who saved him today. For Liangchen to consider you as a friend is truly a great honor." The Xian family's head revealed a warm expression. "Family head praises me too much. But Junior doesn't understand one thing. Brother Liangchen is open-minded and magnanimous. He's not the kind of person who would easily make enemies. Just who would want to kill him?" Ning Chen picked up the tea on the table and softly asked. "As a merchant, it's inevitable for them to have business rivals. In a moment of impulse, it's not strange for them to hire assassins." The Xian family's head sighed. "That makes sense. If that's the case, then family head and eldest young master should be careful. This kind of person can do anything once they go crazy." Ning Chen kindly reminded. The Xian family's head narrowed his eyes. "Thank you nephew for your reminder. I will send more people to strengthen the security of the Xian family's residence." I won't let my enemies take advantage of this. That would be for the best. Previously, Brother Liangchen and Princess Zhao had a small misunderstanding. If something happens to Brother Liangchen now, it will more or less cause rumors to spread. That won't be a good thing for the Xian family to build a good relationship with the city lord. After all, if the Xian family wants to do business, we can't offend the city lord. At this point, Ning Chen changed the topic, and a faint smile flashed in his eyes. He said, "Of course, if something happens to Brother Liangchen, I will be very unhappy. Although I don't really like killing recently, there are always exceptions to everything. No matter if it's the person who hired the murderer, the person who sold the murderer, or the person who added fuel to the fire, I alone am enough to kill them all." Hearing this, the Xian family's head's eyelids twitched. An indescribable chill unconsciously rose up in his heart. But after many years of cultivation, he was able to suppress this bone-chilling cold. He forced a smile and said, "As Liangchen's father, I'm really happy to hear nephew cares so much for him. What I should do?" Ning Chen smiled faintly, and then he put down the teacup before standing up and bowing politely. "It's getting late, so I won't disturb you any longer. I'll take my leave first." With that, Ning Chen turned and left the study, leaving the head of the Xian family alone. He looked at the 2 cups of tea on the table that were gradually cooling down and fell into deep thought. Heaven's will. The Xian clan lord sighed heavily in his heart. Without a doubt, this young man had already seen through something. Such intelligence was truly terrifying. Who would have thought that such a variable would appear at the final juncture? Man proposes, God disposes. In the guest room, Ning Chen returned. Ruoshi stepped forward and whispered, "Young master, how did the discussion go?" It was a pleasant conversation. The corners of Ning Chen's mouth curled up as he said, "Lord, please don't bully Ruoshi for her stupidity. Although Ruoshi can't see through the Xian lord's thoughts, but Lord, I've followed you for a long time so I can still see some of your thoughts." Ruoshi's tone revealed a rare trace of dissatisfaction. Heh. Ning Chen chuckled, "Ruoshi is smarter than before, but today's conversation was indeed peaceful. We didn't tear into each other's faces." While speaking, Ning Chen walked to the table and sat down. He poured himself a cup of water. Just now, he was so focused on talking that he didn't even have time to take a sip of the tea. The situation of the Xian family was actually very clear. Of the 2 young masters, the eldest belonged to the type of ordinary person who was good at keeping things, but lacking in development. As for the second young master, he had shown extraordinary talent in business since childhood. The Xian clan lord wanted the second young master to become a whetstone for the eldest young master's growth. Unfortunately, in the end, things didn't go as planned. Now that Xian Liangchen's wings were growing, he brought more and more benefits to the Xian family. Especially after several trips to the eastern domain, the Xian family's status in Swallow Song City had advanced by leaps and bounds. The second young master of the Xian family had become the most convincing successor in the entire Xian family. The whetstone failed to sharpen the blade, but on the contrary, it was more likely to break the blade of the eldest young master. The matter of Zhao Ling, or smashing Lu Xianlu, was simple and violent, but very effective. The crime of offending a princess was enough to throw Xian Liangchen into the abyss of eternal damnation. Just as Zhao Ling said, in Swallow Song City, her words were the law. As long as no one dared to testify, it was a one-sided story. For a merchant family like the Xian family, how could they dare to offend an official family? The time and place Zhao Ling chose were also very thought-provoking. Lu Xianlu was Xian Liangchen's private property and didn't have much to do with the Xian family. And when Zhao Ling appeared, it just so happened that they had just entered the building. Zhao Ling smashed Lu Xianlu and ordered people to capture Miss Jieqi. Undoubtedly, she wanted to provoke Xian Liangchen. It wasn't a clever arrangement, but it pressed them step by step, leaving them with no way to retreat. In this world, there was only one person who could know Xian Liangchen's whereabouts, character, and even the person he liked so well, the head of the Xian family. That night, when they came back, the head of the Xian family seemed to be magnanimous. He didn't blame them and even rewarded Xian Liangchen and his mother. It was because of this that he was really sure that the head of the Xian family had something to do with what happened at Lu Xianlu. Under normal circumstances, whether what happened at Lu Xianlu was Xian Liangchen's fault or not, the Xian family would suffer the most terrible suppression for offending a princess. The head of the Xian family was too calm. Thinking about it from his perspective, if he did such a thing, no matter who was right or wrong, the result would be Zhang Sun scolding him. This was not only for outsiders to see, but also for his own people in the mansion to see. Moreover, the head of the Xian family gave Xian Liangchen and his mother to live in Donghua Pavilion, which was under the third master's name. Obviously, he was making enemies for them. If it wasn't intentional, with the head of the Xian family, how could he do such a stupid thing? One thing might be a coincidence, but when one thing after another was added together, it could only be inevitable. Sir, do you really think young Master Xian can't see it at all? Ruoshi asked, puzzled. Xian Liangchen is not a fool. He can more or less see his father's thoughts. However, as a person involved, he will inevitably be affected by feelings. The affection between father and son always makes people think of everything on the bright side. Fortunately, the current situation hasn't reached the point of no return. Since the head of the Xian family still maintains the mask of a loving father, then don't take it off for the rest of your life. At the end of his words, a touch of coldness flashed in Ning Chen's eyes. In tonight's conversation, he had said all that needed to be said. If the head of the Xian family still insisted on taking off his mask and made a move on Xian Liangchen again, then the Xian family would have to be prepared to bear all the consequences. City Lord Manor. City Lord Yan Ge stood in his room with his brows furrowed. His mind was extremely irritable. The assassins from the sect of life extermination failed, and they didn't even manage to hurt the young man. This was really beyond his expectations. Now it seems he really needs to reconsider his partnership with the Xian family. City Lord, a letter from the Xian family. At this moment, a guard came in and handed over a letter. City Lord Yan Ji's eyes narrowed. After opening the letter and reading it, his expression immediately changed. This young man actually guessed it so quickly and even issued a warning. I can't hesitate anymore. City Lord Yan Ji's heart sank. He didn't care who would be the head of the Xian family in the future. There was no need to provoke such a terrifying powerhouse. It wasn't too late to salvage the situation before they shed all pretense of cordiality. In this world, there were no eternal enemies and no eternal friends. Merchants pursued profit, and so did everyone else. Thinking of this, City Lord Yan Ge went to the table and quickly wrote 2 letters. After thinking for a moment, he said in a deep voice, "Come, summon the princess." Yes. A guard obeyed. Not long after, a purple-robed Zhao Ling came in. She respectfully bowed and said, "Father. Here are 2 letters. One is for the head of the Xian family. Send someone to deliver it. The other is for Ning Chen. Personally deliver it," City Lord Yan Ge said sternly. Zhao Ling took the letter and frowned. She said, "Father, are you trying to rope this person in?" "Yes." City Lord Yan Ge nodded and said seriously, "This is different from the past. If you can avoid provoking this kind of person, you can't become his enemy." Zhao Ling didn't refute. She nodded and left. Under the moonlight, there were people who were unable to sleep in each of the 2 manors. In the silent night, a cold wind blew, causing many people to be worried. The night deepened, and the moon moved west. In the courtyard, the spiritual qi around Hong Yi's body revolved and merged with the world. It became more and more hazy, as if it would break through the sky at any moment. Suddenly, a silver blade descended from the sky. It was as fast as a gust of wind, heading straight for her. In the next moment, an afterimage wearing a strange mask appeared. His silver clothes fluttered, and the blade swept past in an instant. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. His figure flashed, dodging one blade after another. Then, he condensed Yuan into a sword finger. With a clang, he met the silver blade head-on. The surging sword chi and blade intent scattered in all directions. However, in an instant, it was blocked by the surrounding spiritual chi and disappeared without a trace. Young Master Beigong, isn't this greeting a bit too much? Ning Chen released the silver blade in his finger and said calmly. Heh, you even saw through this. The person who came took off his mask. Under the moonlight, a familiar face was reflected. It was one of the twin geniuses of Yangu, Beigong Yu. There are many people who use the blade in Yangu City, but only you have such mastery, Ning Chen said honestly. Can't we fight? Beigong Yu asked seriously. Young Master Beigong should be able to see that I haven't really fought with anyone in a long time. I've almost forgotten how to hold a sword. Sorry, Ning Chen replied. What a pity. Beigong Yu sighed softly. He turned his silver blade and returned it to its sheath. Since Brother Ning doesn't want to fight, I won't force you. I just hope that if Brother Ning wants to fight again, you can seriously finish today's unfinished battle with me, Beigong Yu said seriously. If that day really comes, I'll definitely accompany you, Ning Chen said calmly. Chapter 413. Ning Chen had sealed his sword and hadn't used it for 9 years. As he said, he didn't like to kill. Ridiculous and even somewhat ironic words, but they were the most serious words. After fighting for half of his life, he was tired of it. As the sun rose, Ruoshi got up early and began to pack her things. Yesterday, her young master said he might leave today. Young master, will the city lord really send someone? Ruoshi doubtfully asked. Well, if there are no accidents, it will be today. Ning Chen replied. After what happened yesterday, the city lord should have made a decision. No matter how late it is, it can't be delayed past today. Not long after, Xan Liangchen arrived. When he saw the packed things on the table, he couldn't help but be surprised. Looking at the red figure in the room, he was puzzled. Brother Ning is leaving? Well, I've disturbed you for a long time. It's time to leave. Ning Chen nodded. Why are you in such a hurry? Why don't you stay for a few more days? Liangchen can also show Brother Ning the different customs of the southern tomb. Xin Liangchen sincerely urged him to stay. Brother Liangchen, you've shown us a lot of things these days. Ruoshi and I are very grateful for that. However, there are still some things that have been delayed for a long time. We can't stay here any longer. Ning Chen said honestly. Xin Liangchen saw that he couldn't persuade him to stay, so he didn't force him. He sighed softly and said, in that case, Liangchen won't force you to stay. I hope Brother Ning can come back to the Xin family after you finish your business. Certainly. Ning Chen nodded. Second young master, Princess Zhao has come to visit. She said she wants to see you and young Master Ning. Outside the guest room, a servant came in and respectfully reported. Xin Liangchen frowned. Why is she here? She finally came. Ning Chen wasn't too surprised. He left Ruoshi to continue packing and immediately went to the front hall with Xin Liangchen. The reason he hadn't left yet was to wait for the city lord's reply. Now that he was waiting, he could leave with peace of mind. In the front hall, Zhao Ling was sitting in the hall. When she saw the two coming, a faint light flashed in her beautiful eyes. She didn't expect that a profit transaction at 6 NV building would lead to such a terrifying young man. Even a top assassin like Hong Wulei couldn't hurt him. Your Highness, Xian Liangchen saluted and said respectfully. No need for formalities, second young master, Zhao Ling, said softly. Princess Zhao, who was sitting in the middle of the hall, looked as gentle as water, as if she was a real lady from a noble family. There was not the slightest trace of impoliteness on her face. When Ning Chen saw this, admiration flashed through his heart. Putting aside personal grudges, this Zhao Linger was indeed not an ordinary person. She knew better than anyone when to advance or retreat. When it was time to be ruthless, she would not show the slightest bit of mercy. When it was time to retreat, she would not hesitate. Young Master Ning, this is a small token of my appreciation. I hope you won't refuse it. Zhao Ling, stood up and handed over a letter. Ning Chen took the letter and glanced at it. He laughed softly and said, Ning Chen accepts the city lord's good intentions. Please thank the city lord on Ning Chen's behalf when you return. I will, Zhao Ling, replied. After the business, it was polite greetings. Zhao Ling, intended to ease the grievances of that day with the two, and Xian Liangchen did not want to offend a princess of the royal family. Therefore, the three of them talked harmoniously. Those who did not know might think that the three of them were old friends. After staying for half an hour, Zhao Ling, left. The two saw her off at the gate of the Xian mansion. Brother Ning, thank you. Xian Liangchen turned around and looked at the person in front of him. He was not a fool. Naturally, he could see that the reason why Zhao Ling had personally come to ease the grudge between them was because she was afraid of the young man beside him whose cultivation was unfathomable. Brother Liangchen, this time, I really have to go. Take care. Ning Chen replied. Take care. Xian Liangchen sighed. In the guest room, Ruoshi came out and looked at the young master waiting in front of her. She smiled sweetly and quickly walked up. The two left and headed west. The road ahead was long. No one knew when they would reach the place they wanted to reach. Young master, why did Princess Zhao come? Ruoshi asked curiously. To apologize. Ning Chen replied. What is the apology? Ruoshi continued to ask. The quota for the Tian Shu dynasty's competition. Ning Chen replied. Oh. Ruoshi suddenly lost interest. Such a thing, if the young master wanted, he could get it himself anywhere. Moreover, the young master had no interest in it. He might not even go. Where are we going now? Ruoshi asked softly. To the Jadeite Holy Land to find the method of resurrection. Ning Chen replied. These days, he more or less understood the general situation of Nanling from Xian Liangchen. This Jadeite Holy Land was as famous as the Tian Shu dynasty, but it was an inheritance that existed in the form of a sect. It sat on the most precious treasure of heaven and earth, the Jadeite cauldron. Its attainments in the art of resurrection were extraordinary. He did not know why the ghost girl had not woken up. If he wanted to find the answer, he must go to the Jadeite Holy Land. However, the somewhat troublesome thing was that the old ancestor of the Jadeite Holy Land was a top powerhouse close to the perfect realm. Such an existence was not to be provoked at present. Since he couldn't take it by force, he could only choose to find a way to enter the Jadeite Holy Land. It wasn't too difficult to enter the Jadeite Holy Land. Such a famous Holy Land would recruit a large number of outer disciples. Although it was not easy to go one step further, the identity of an outer disciple was enough for him for the time being. He owed the ghost girl too much, so he could only try to wake her up. Ruoshi didn't say anything. She knew that the ghost girl's matter was a hurdle in the young master's heart. As long as the ghost girl didn't wake up, the young master would not give up. Although she didn't understand cultivation, she also knew how difficult it was to resurrect a person who could be said to be dead. Perhaps it was impossible. However, she didn't dare to say such words. Because the young master could ignore everything, but this was his reverse scale that couldn't be touched. The jadeite Holy Land was very far away, almost across half of Nanling. Ning Chen walked with Ruo Shi while looking for other feasible methods as usual. There were countless strange methods in the world, and the jadeite Holy Land was not necessarily the only inheritance that had mastered the art of resurrection. Clang, kill. As the two moved forward, the sound of fighting in the distance was deafening. Chaotic sword shadows surged and scattered. There were no less than 10 Xiantian powerhouses fighting. One of them was dressed in brown and red. Her face was cold and elegant. She swung her blade and swayed the sword light that was constantly threatening her life. Rip. Her clothes were torn apart, and her clothes were dyed red. Hong Wulei blocked the fatal sword for her companion behind her. She turned her blade and blocked the sword light from all directions. However, at this moment, behind Hong Wulei, the woman who was being protected flipped her palm and pressed it on her back. With a bang, several feet of red gradually faded. Ah! Hong Wulei's figure staggered. She turned her head in disbelief and looked at her companion who took the opportunity to retreat. Her eyes flashed with sadness. Why? She really didn't hesitate to betray her own people. The leader of the 11 Xiantian powerhouses, a middle-aged man with a cold expression, sneered. Big brother, don't talk nonsense with her. Since that one escaped, send this one to the Western Paradise. Not far from the middle-aged man, a man with a slightly weaker cultivation coldly said. Hong Wulei didn't say a word. Her feet moved strangely and she no longer wanted to fight. She wanted to break out. You want to leave? It's too late. In the midst of the ridicule, the 11 Xiantian powerhouses moved together to seal the way forward. One sword light after another, not leaving the slightest chance of survival. Hong Wulei's right shoulder was dyed red again. In the rain of swords, her body was like duckweed. One more step and she would die. A pitiful person must have a hateful side. Yesterday's cause, today's effect. Since she chose to live on the edge of the sword, life and death were no longer in her own hands. At this moment, the sound of footsteps came from the distance. Two figures slowly walked past. One was calm, and the other was gentle. Young master, do you need help? Ruo Shi asked. Life and death are up to fate. Ning Chen calmly said. Ruo Shi didn't say anything and continued to move forward with the young master beside her. The sudden appearance of two people in the distance attracted the attention of everyone present. Everyone present was a Xiantian. Although they were far away, they could still perceive the existence of the two. Meeting again and passing by far without stopping, it showed that although their masters no longer cared about that day's matter, they also wouldn't help. Under the situation of certain death, Hong Wulei's eyes flashed with a touch of decisiveness. Regardless of the sword light behind her, she swung her Xiantian sword away from the three swords in front of her and immediately rushed forward. Two Xiantian swords entered her body, bringing a big waterfall of blood. One of the swords even penetrated her heart. However, in front of the desire to survive, the woman's footsteps didn't stop and continued to rush forward. Chase. Knowing that Hong Wulei was seriously injured, the 11 people quickly followed. They were determined to eliminate the source of the trouble and not give her any chance to survive. The distance of less than 1,000 feet was so far at this moment. Blood dripped from her chest and dyed her clothes red again and again. The seriously injured Hong Wulei's consciousness became more and more blurred and was close to the moment of confusion. In front of the two people, Hong Wulei finally couldn't hold on. In her last glance, there was only hope and pleading for survival. The next moment, she fainted. Ruo Shi subconsciously reached out to catch the falling woman. When she reacted, she looked at the young master in front of her and flashed a difficult expression. Put down this woman and get out of here quickly. Among the 11 people, the weakest young man looked impatient and shouted. He hated these playboys the most. If it weren't for his elder brother's order to not stir up trouble outside, he really wouldn't have bothered to speak and would have just killed them. You want to save her? Ning Chen ignored her and asked softly while looking at his maid's embarrassed expression. Yes. Ruoshi nodded. Looking at the unconscious woman in her arms, she couldn't help but say, Ruoshi misses Miss Shi. At that time, Miss Shi also took a step into the dangerous building and turned into Lord Lan. Her situation was very similar to this woman. It's just that Miss Shi was protected by the young master and was forcibly pulled out of the dangerous building. However, the woman in front of them wasn't so lucky. If they didn't care, she really wouldn't survive today. Since you want to save her, then save her. As soon as his words fell, Ning Chen didn't say anything more. He took a step forward and his red clothes fluttered wildly. Chapter 4:14. With one step, her aura changed abruptly. The surging sword intent spread out in all directions. The 11 Xiantian masters were shocked. Before they could react, they were sent flying. A powerful but murderous sword intent flowed around Hong Yi's body. After 9 years of being sealed, it had melted away her previous murderous intent. If she didn't make a move, it would be hard to believe that the person in front of them was also a martial artist. The 11 people landed on the ground and took several steps back with a dignified expression. Strong. A completely different sword intent. It was different from any sword they had seen before. They didn't know if it was because they were too inexperienced or because the sword above the sword was beyond their comprehension. Your Excellency, are you trying to make an enemy out of our 9 Heaven Sword sect? The middle-aged man in the lead said in a deep voice. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes and said, Is it serious? Arrogant. The young man who had spoken rudely earlier became furious. He brandished his sword and charged forward. The sharp edge of the sword forced its way into his mind. One sword was followed by 10 swords. The cold light on the swords sealed every major acupoint of the human body. It was a killing move that left no way out. The swords in the hands of the 11 Xiantian masters streaked across the cold light and arrived in front of the two in an instant. Ning Chen raised his hand and released a wave of sword intent. Using his sword to block the swords, the broken swords quickly turned back and stopped the moment they reached the throat. The 11 Xiantian masters were shocked. They watched the two walk past them, but they didn't dare to move half a step. After the two left, the broken swords fell and stabbed into the ground. A cold wind blew by. However, at this moment, the hearts of the 11 Xiantian masters were even colder. Their legs that were fortunately stopped in front of the gates of hell kept trembling. 10 miles away, beside a clear stream, Ruoshi was cleaning Hong Wulei's wound. Not far away, Ning Chen had his back to the two. He was roasting the fish in his hand with a calm and focused expression. In the clear stream, a trace of red drifted into the distance. The sword that hurt the heart almost took the woman's life. Fortunately, Hong Wulei had some medicine on her and barely saved her life. Young master, come and help. Ruoshi couldn't help but shout to the young master not far away. I'm coming. Ning Chen responded. He immediately put the fish that was almost ready on the fire and got up to walk to the stream. Here. Ruoshi covered the exposed view of the woman beside her and reached out to tear a piece of cloth from her clothes. She handed it over and whispered, Cover your eyes. Men and women shouldn't touch each other. Don't look around. Heh. Ning Chen chuckled and didn't say much. He took the cloth and blindfolded his eyes. He did everything according to his maid's instructions. You just need to support her. Ruoshi grabbed the former's hand and guided him to support Hong Wulei. Then, she carefully applied the ointment and bandaged the wound. Young master, when will she wake up? Ruoshi asked softly while bandaging the wound. Let's do it tonight. It's just a small injury. It won't get in the way, Ning Chen said casually. How is this a small injury? She's a woman. If she heard your words, she would die from anger. Young master, you must learn to have tender feelings for the fairer sex. Ruoshi's tone carried a trace of dissatisfaction. Ning Chen smiled. He knew that he couldn't afford to offend this girl on this topic, so he didn't continue the conversation. Not long after, Ruoshi bandaged the wound and carefully put on Hong Wulei's clothes. Then, she said, "Okay, you can take the cloth off your eyes." Ning Chen took off the cloth and opened his eyes. He looked at Ruoshi in front of him and said, "The fish is almost done roasting. Let's rest here today." And Ruoshi nodded. This woman's injury was not light. It was indeed inappropriate to take her on the road. Waiting for a night might be the best choice. Simply tidying up a place to lie down, Ning Chen helped Hong Wulei to the top. Then, he walked to the fire and sat there with Ruoshi, quietly watching her eat. Ruoshi tore the fish bit by bit and ate it in small bites. Although the young master's tea-making skills were not good, his roasting skills were definitely not comparable to anyone. In the beginning, little Mingyu was picky and often unwilling to eat. The young master's skill in roasting fish was basically ground by Mingyu bit by bit. The sky gradually darkened and the night was cold and humid. Ning Chen stoked the bonfire even more to dispel the surrounding cold air for the woman beside him. After a tiring day, Ruoshi lay down next to the bonfire and fell asleep after a while. Under the light of the fire, her face was so beautiful that it was intoxicating. Ning Chen sat quietly to the side, using his phoenix energy to comb the former's body. Right now, the only person left beside him was Ruoshi. Although she was only his maid in name, in reality, she was the one he couldn't bear to part with. Once the phoenix energy entered her body, the fatigue between Ruoshi's eyebrows eased slightly and gradually relaxed. The night was getting deeper and deeper. When the moon was high in the sky, the unconscious Hong Wulei's fingers moved slightly. The next moment, her eyes slowly opened. After a trace of confusion, she quickly recovered her clarity. A strange breath not far away startled Hong Wulei. She hurriedly got up and grabbed the dagger at her waist. Quiet. Ning Chen glanced at the former and whispered. Only then did Hong Wulei react. After seeing the woman sleeping next to the red-clothed young man, she immediately quieted down. Ning Chen didn't speak anymore and sat there quietly, guarding the most important person around him. Hong Wulei also wanted to understand what was going on. Her eyes looked at the bonfire in a daze. No one knew what she was thinking. At dawn, Ruoshi woke up. After seeing the young master beside her, she smiled sweetly. Young master. Before she finished speaking, Ruoshi's eyes caught sight of Hong Wulei, who woke up not far away. Her face showed surprise. Ignoring her young master, she got up and walked forward. She whispered, "You're awake. How do you feel?" Looking at the woman in front of her, a smile flashed across Hong Wulei's face. There was gratitude, but she still didn't speak. Ruoshi frowned slightly. What's going on? She can't speak. Ning Chen said. When he checked her injuries, he found that this woman was mute. No wonder he didn't see her say a word in their two encounters. Can it be cured? Ruoshi's eyes flashed with a touch of pity and asked. Her veins were sealed by herself. Whether it can be cured or not, it's not up to others. Ning Chen replied. Hong Wulei looked at Ruoshi and shook her head with a smile, meaning it's fine. Ruoshi sighed in her heart and whispered, "What's your name?" Hong Wulei picked up a branch and wrote her name in front of her. Her name was like her person, Hong Wulei. Hong Wulei. Ruoshi whispered. The name was very pleasant to hear, but it always gave people a sad feeling. It's dawn, let's go. Ning Chen got up, waved his hand to summon the ghost palanquin, and calmly said. Hong Wulei glanced at the ghost palanquin filled with ghost energy, and a strange light flashed in her eyes. After returning to her senses, she pointed to herself, then to the palanquin, and gently shook her head, indicating that she could go on her own. Ning Chen didn't force her. He put away the palanquin, extinguished the bonfire on the ground, and immediately prepared to continue on their journey. Ruoshi helped Hong Wulei up and followed him. They weren't far from the nearest city, but with a wounded person, their speed was a lot slower. Ning Chen didn't care. He walked as fast as the two behind him. Along the way, Ruoshi and Hong Wulei whispered something. Although Hong Wulei couldn't speak, her gestures and writing were something Ruoshi could barely understand. Hong Wulei was a little afraid of Ning Chen, but she liked Ruoshi very much. After talking along the way, the relationship between the two quickly got closer. When the sky was about to turn dark, the three finally arrived at the nearest Chiyi city. They found a nearby inn and booked 2 rooms to rest. Ruoshi said she wanted to take care of Hong Wulei, so she didn't ask for a separate room. Ning Chen wasn't worried that Hong Wulei would harm Ruoshi. His room was next door. This distance couldn't stop him. "Young master, the bed is ready. Please rest early." Ruoshi turned her head and said. "N." Ning Chen nodded. "Young master, let's stop here for a few days. Miss Wu Lei's injury is not light. She needs to rest." Ruoshi stepped forward and asked. "Okay, whatever you say." Ning Chen whispered. "Young master is the best." Ruoshi smiled and said. "Oh, you really know how to talk." Ning Chen laughed. "Please rest early. I won't talk with you anymore. Miss Wu Lei still needs someone to take care of her." After speaking, Ruoshi didn't stay any longer. She walked out of the room, gently closed the door, and walked to the room next door. In the next room, Hong Wulei was sitting on the bed. After seeing Ruoshi walk in, a smile appeared on her face. "I've already sent young master to rest. In fact, you don't have to be so afraid of him. Young master is very easy to talk to." Ruoshi stepped forward and raised the pillow behind the woman and whispered. Hong Wulei chuckled and pointed to the former and then to herself. What she meant was that for that young master, the two of them were different. Although it was that young master who saved her, the one who really made the difference was Ruoshi. She knew very well that young master was definitely not a soft-hearted person. "Wulei, we will stay here for a few days. After your injury is almost healed, we will continue on our journey. However, the place I and young master are going to is a bit far. Do you want to go together?" Speaking of this, Ruoshi hesitated for a moment and whispered, "I heard from young master what kind of organization Luo Life Extermination Gate is. If possible, you'd better not go back. Such a life is too dangerous after all. Revenge." Hong Wulei stretched out her hand and gently wrote a word on the quilt. The secret hidden in her heart for many years was revealed for the first time today. In the next room, Ning Chen stood in front of the window and quietly looked at the night scene outside. His eyes flashed with thoughts. This Hong Wulei is not simple. She sealed her ability to speak with the meridian sealing technique. If it's not a big conspiracy, then it's a big enmity. Luo Life Extermination Gate was the top assassin organization in the entire southern tomb. It was rumored that the 3 sect masters were each more terrifying than the other. The major sects and dynasties were very afraid of them. Hong Wulei's aptitude was also first class among the people he had seen. It's just that she lacked the guidance of a strong master. That's why she was inferior to young geniuses like Nan Mingtian and Bei Gongyu. In the next room, Ruoshi looked at the life story written by Hong Wulei. Her eyes reddened and flashed with unbearable tears. "Can I let young master teach you?" Ruoshi whispered. Although she didn't know how powerful young master was, he should be much more powerful than many people. Hong Wulei was slightly startled when she heard this. She subconsciously looked at the side room with fear in her eyes. Chapter 4:15. At dawn, Ruoshi knocked on the door next door. After hearing the young master's reply, she gently pushed the door open and entered. "Young master, Ruoshi greets you," Ruoshi said with a smile on her face. Ning Chen glanced at Ruoshi who came in, and the corner of his mouth curved slightly. This girl most likely has something to ask of him. "Young master, can Ruoshi ask you for a favor?" Sure enough, Ruoshi stepped forward and gently massaged his shoulders. "Say it." Ning Chen smiled. "Can you give some pointers to Wu Lei's cultivation?" "Just a few days will do." Ruoshi used some strength in her hands and requested. Ning Chen turned his head slightly and looked at Ruoshi who was close at hand. He teased, "It seems that you two are getting along well. You sold your young master out so quickly. Young master, did you agree?" Ruoshi's eyes flashed with expectation. Ning Chen nodded gently. He didn't care about Hong Wu Lei, but he didn't want to refuse Ruoshi's request. "Thank you, young master." Ruoshi smiled and immediately called the woman who had been waiting outside the room. "Wu Lei, the young master has agreed. Hurry up and come over." As soon as her voice fell, Hong Wu Lei walked into the room with a bit of nervousness and gratitude on her beautiful face. She respectfully bowed. "These 2 days, you should recuperate first. 2 days later, we will set off. Before we reach the Yuheng Holy Land, you can learn as much as you can," Ning Chen said calmly. Hong Wu Lei nodded silently. She knew that this was her best opportunity. Whether she could truly become a powerhouse or not depended on how much she could comprehend along the way. 2 days wasn't a long time. For a cultivator, it was a blink of an eye. Although Hong Wu Lei's injuries hadn't healed yet, she had no problem walking like an ordinary person. 2 days later, Ning Chen took the two to continue their journey. Ruoshi intended to give Hong Wu Lei more opportunities to receive guidance, so every once in a while, she would pretend to be tired and ask for a rest. Ning Chen clearly saw through his maid's thoughts, but he didn't point it out. According to the agreement, he seriously guided Hong Wu Lei's cultivation. No matter how the world tries to beautify the essence of swords and sabers, they are still killing weapons in the end. How you use the weapons in your hands will have a decisive impact on your strength. Your foundation isn't bad, but you're overly focused on your moves. Although your opponent might be temporarily at a disadvantage because they're not familiar with your style, the more experienced a person is, the faster they'll be able to adapt. Your advantage will quickly disappear, and it might even become a disadvantage. As he spoke, Ning Chen's figure flashed and dodged the blade. He condensed his sword finger and attacked Ning Chen's heart meridian. Hong Wu Lei wanted to block, but his saber was tied to itself. It was too late for him to block. Can you see why? In front of his chest, Ning Chen stopped moving his fingers and said calmly, "The more complicated a move is, the more flaws it will have, and the slower it will be to counterattack. Unless you have an overwhelming amount of true origin, if you pursue complicated moves too much, you'll just be spinning a cocoon around yourself." After saying all this, Ning Chen didn't say anything else. He walked away, leaving her to practice on her own. Is that all? When Ruoshi saw her young master coming over, she couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He only gave a few words of advice, isn't that too fast? It's already a lot. Everything has to be done step by step. There's no need to rush, Ning Chen replied. Ruoshi didn't quite understand, but if her young master said it was a lot, then it really was a lot. Looking at the woman practicing hard in front of her, Ruoshi sighed and said softly, "Young master, after your guidance, with Wu Lei's current cultivation, is it possible for him to defeat a 3-disaster powerhouse?" "It's very difficult," Ning Chen said honestly. Hong Wu Lei's cultivation was at the 3rd Xiantian tribulation, far from the 3 disasters. Although it wasn't impossible for him to go against the flow, the premise was that he had an absolutely powerful trump card. In the past, Senior was able to fight against the invincible martial monarch with a fourth tribulation cultivation. That was because Senior's sword was incomparably accurate. The martial monarch's moves were blocked, making it difficult for him to display his full strength. The other person was Mu Bai. In this world, Mu Bai was probably the person closest to the Sword of Origin. It was difficult to measure him with his realm. In addition to these two, there were several others. Although they were a bit lacking in height, they could still barely fight across realms. For example, Wan Feng Chen, Mu Qian Shang, Barbarian King, and so on. Such people were very rare. Hong Wulei obviously hadn't reached this level yet, so he could only do his best. The southern tomb was much bigger than expected. The three walked and stopped for more than a month, but they had only covered less than a third of the distance. They were still far from the Jade Holy Land. For more than a month, Hong Wulei abandoned his previous tricky habits and simplified the complicated. Starting from the most basic, he honed his own moves and styles. Ning Chen didn't teach him much. Occasionally, he would point out the deviation in his moves, but he didn't teach him any techniques or moves. Hong Wulei didn't have any dissatisfaction and improved his habits little by little. He was diligent, but not greedy. The woman's perseverance was impressive. Although Ning Chen didn't ask, he could more or less guess that the woman in front of him who was practicing hard should have a great hatred buried deep in her heart. Ning Chen had always regarded the Buddhist saying of repaying grievances as nonsense. If any hatred could be forgiven, then what was the use of morality and law in the world? Whether or not Hong Wulei could take revenge in the future, he didn't have the qualifications to care. Because of Ruoshi's soft-heartedness, their fate was only on this road. When the road ended, their fate would end. As for how much she could improve, it would depend on her own good fortune. No one could decide the fate of others, and he was the same. The road had to be walked by oneself. If Hong Wulei chose to take revenge, then she must be prepared to bear all the consequences. Living was luck, dying was fate. More than a month later, the Jade Holy Land was getting closer and closer. It was no longer as unreachable as before. Ruoshi's eyes flashed with worry. She knew that the Jade Holy Land wasn't far away, which meant that the young master's time to guide Hong Wulei was getting less and less. Young master, she no longer has any relatives. Please help her again. Ruoshi couldn't bear it and begged again. She understood how difficult it was for a lonely woman to live in this world. If she hadn't been brought back to the Marquis mansion by the young master, perhaps she wouldn't have had the courage to continue living. Hong Wulei was stronger than her. For so many years, she had silently endured too much suffering. In order to hide her identity, she didn't hesitate to seal her meridians and make herself lose the ability to speak. For more than 10 years, she couldn't speak a word. What kind of perseverance was needed to bear such suffering? Ning Chen was silent for a moment. Then, he picked up a branch from the ground and looked at Hong Wulei in front of him. He calmly said, "Attack." Hong Wulei nodded and stepped forward. The long sword in her hand swept out. It was a simple move, but it was more difficult to resist than before. Hong Wulei's strange movement technique flashed across the water. When the sword fell, Hong Wulei's figure dissipated. It was just an afterimage. Hong Wulei was startled. Without thinking, he changed the direction of his saber and held it in a reverse grip, slashing behind him. Good reaction. Behind Hong Wulei's figure condensed, but the moment the sword approached, it dissipated again. Hong Wulei had never seen such a movement technique before. The more she fought, the more shocked she became. She never thought that there was such an exquisite movement technique in the world. Pa! The branch was knocked down. Hong Wulei's right hand went numb. She couldn't hold the cold sword in her hand and it fell to the ground. Red light flashed. Ning Chen stopped and looked at the woman in front of him. He said seriously, "There are traces of my footsteps on the ground. Remember it carefully and practice seriously. This is for you to save your life." Hong Wulei was startled. She quickly recovered and respectfully bowed. She would never forget the kindness of teaching her. In the last month or so, Ning Chen didn't teach her anything. Most of the time, Hong Wulei practiced silently. Occasionally, she would ask for advice if she couldn't figure it out. The 4-month journey had finally come to an end. The Jadeite Holy Land was close at hand. For the first time, Hong Wulei took the initiative to challenge her benefactor to verify the results of the past 4 months. Ning Chen didn't refuse. Although he sealed his sword and replaced it with a dry branch, he met the cold sword he taught. There was no surprise in the outcome of the battle. Hong Wulei was still defeated. There was an absolute gap in the combat experience between the two. It was not something that could be erased with 4 months of hard work. However, Hong Wulei's improvement was very obvious. At least, it was impossible for him to break the weapon in his hand like he did 4 months ago without taking a step back. At the end of the battle, Hong Wulei put away her sword and respectfully bowed to her benefactor in front of her. Parting was imminent. Ruoshi's eyes were filled with tears. In the past 4 months, the two had almost become friends who talked about everything. However, they both had their own things to do. It was impossible for them to always walk the same path. Ruoshi stepped forward and hugged her goodbye. She whispered, "Don't force yourself too much. If you encounter trouble that you can't deal with, come to us." Hong Wulei nodded. Although she was reluctant, she still hardened her heart and turned away. A cold wind blew past, and the dark red figure gradually disappeared into the distance. Not long after, she disappeared. "Let's go too." Ning Chen looked at Ruoshi and said. "N." Ruoshi put away her thoughts and responded. Half a day later, the two stepped into the territory of the Yuheng Holy Land. As an inheritance that was on an equal footing with the Tianshu dynasty, there were countless powerhouses in the Yuheng Holy Land. Xiantian masters could be seen everywhere. The deacon elders were at least above the 5th tribulation. Ning Chen came to find the art of resurrection. Therefore, he deliberately chose the identity of an outer disciple. First, it wouldn't arouse suspicion. Second, it was to stay as far away as possible from the old ancestor in the Yuheng Holy Land who was close to the perfect realm. The art of resurrection was a secret art of the Yuheng Holy Land. The difficulty of obtaining it was not ordinary. Especially when there was a top powerhouse who was close to the perfect realm in charge here, it was even more difficult. The majestic Holy Land was like a fairyland on earth. Under the fairyland, thousands of peaks surrounded and guarded. Tens of thousands of outer disciples lived here, practicing martial arts. They hoped that one day they could enter the mountain and become the most glorious inner disciple. The desire for longevity drove countless people to worship the mountain day and night. Some gave up wealth, and some gave up power. Ning Chen lived at the foot of the mountain, looking at the mountain in the distance. He waited for several months. Chapter 4:16. At the top of the mountain, a decree was issued. The triennial inner sect disciple competition had begun. The ban on the mountain was temporarily lifted, and the outer sect disciples were allowed to attend the competition. Within the sacred grounds, experts were as numerous as the clouds, and the inner court disciples were even the backbone of Jade Hall. There were innumerable congenital realm experts, and there were even some outstanding figures that weren't inferior to the deacon elders. At the top of the mountain, the iron chains pierced through the clouds. The waves wriggled as the 16 black iron chains locked onto the battling platform at the top of the sky. Sabers and swords clashed. The chi of the sabers and swords dispersed, interweaving into a dazzling martial art that captured one's mind. The strongest disciples of the inner sect had officially faced off against each other. This time, the grand competition would not only determine the ranking of the inner sect disciples, but also the qualifications to participate in the 100 Empire competition. As an inheritance that was equally famous as the Tianshu dynasty, the Yuheng sacred ground was similarly ranked in the 100 dynasties. The top 3 that were determined this time would represent the Yuheng sacred ground to participate in the 100 dynasty competition that was about to arrive. The 2 strongest people in Alioth were without a doubt. The first was the top inner court disciple that had successively won 3 competitions, Yi Nishuan, and the second was a woman called Lian Hongzhu. Her strength might not be inferior to Yi Nishuan, but she kept a slightly lower profile and very rarely used her full strength. Their strength had already reached half a step into the 3 disasters realm, or even the 3 disasters realm, far surpassing the others. As long as nothing unexpected happened, they would definitely obtain the qualifications to participate in the 100 Empire competition. The real suspense was who among the 300 inner disciples would be able to obtain the last spot. Deacon Elder, we are also disciples of the Holy Land. Shouldn't we also have the qualifications to compete for the 100 Empire competition? Among the tens of thousands of Outer Sanctum disciples, there was no lack of Xiantian realm experts. Naturally, they were unwilling to give up the opportunity that all the martial artists in the world wanted. They looked at the 5 deacon elders sitting outside the martial arts sparring platform and argued with reason. Elders, please give us a chance. Another few inborn experts stood out and bowed respectfully. With someone taking the lead, at this moment, the tens of thousands of outer court disciples at the peak of the mountain were no longer willing to just be spectators. Their voices were like a huge wave that shook the entire mountain, causing the expressions of the 5 deacon elders to change. Qing Wei, as they wish, as long as someone can defeat the top 10 inner disciples, we'll give them a chance. Just as the 5 deacon elders were unable to make a decision, a calm voice rang out from the depths of the mountain. Yes. In the middle of the 5, a gray-robed, white-haired old man respectfully accepted the order. At the foot of the mountain, Ning Chen gazed at the top of the mountain. The light in his eyes kept flickering. He was not interested in the 100 Empire competition, but this was indeed the best time to go up the mountain to look for the art of rebirth. Red clothes moved. Flowing light flashed in an instant, so fast that it was hard to see clearly. The competition at the peak of the mountain was still ongoing. The selection of tens of thousands of outer disciples took up most of the Holy Land's attention. No one noticed that at the foot of the mountain, a red shadow flashed past and directly entered the depths of the mountain. The red light rushed into the profound pavilion, and the mechanisms were activated one after another. However, the speed of the red light was so fast that all the mechanisms in the pavilion were rendered useless. In the blink of an eye, Ning Chen arrived on the last floor of the Profound Secrets Pavilion. He scanned the floor with his divine sense, then took a step forward and appeared in front of a shrine. He flipped his palm over and looked at the jade slip inside, his eyes narrowing. Is this it? Sir, don't you think it's a bit rude for you to barge into the Alioth Forbidden Land? A white-robed man walked out. He had a sword on his back, and his aura was extremely powerful. I had no choice. I'm sorry. Ning Chen looked at him warily. This was the first time he had encountered a true expert since coming to Nanling. This art of rebirth requires the Alioth Divine Cauldron to be effective. Sir, you've come here for nothing. In addition, this art of rebirth is a secret of the Alioth Holy Land. Anyone who sees it will have to leave behind their life. You should think carefully about whether you want to see it, said the man calmly. Ning Chen sighed and took the jade slip. He had already come this far. How could he give up now? The man didn't stop him. He calmly waited for him to finish. This young man in front of him was not ordinary. He couldn't easily defeat him. After Ning Chen finished looking through the jade slip, he put it back. This person hadn't lied to him. This art of rebirth truly did require the Alioth Divine Cauldron to be effective. The Profound Secrets Pavilion is too small. Let's go outside and fight. The man didn't say anything else. He turned and walked away. Ning Chen followed. The ceremony was over. All that was left was a true life and death battle. Below the profound secrets pavilion, 4 grand elders of the Alioth Holy Land appeared. They were all experts of the second calamity. When they saw the azure-robed man walk out, they courteously bowed. Greetings, Enforcement Elder. Within the Alioth Holy Land, aside from the sect master and patriarch, the person with the highest status was this Enforcement Elder. Behind him was Ning Chen. He was wearing red robes, and his expression was calm. He didn't seem the slightest bit timid. The 4 grand elders frowned. They had thought that the intruder was some old monster from a large power. They hadn't expected him to be so young. Xiao Wuming, please advise me. Nameless sword, Xiao Wuming said calmly as he looked at the young man before him. Please. Ning Chen raised his index and middle finger. Sword intent began to revolve around him. Outside the battle, the 4 grand elders stood guard, blocking all paths of retreat to prevent the red-robed young man from leaving. Xiao Wuming's body moved. His sword flashed, and the wind and clouds changed. An extremely powerful sword intent slashed down, illuminating the entire mountain. The red-robed young man also moved, dodging the attack. His finger condensed yuan, and spiritual qi filled the sky. With a slash of his sword, the earth shook and mountains collapsed. Heaven and earth trembled. As soon as the 2 experts clashed, they knew that their opponents weren't ordinary. One was powerful, while the other was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, they had crossed paths several times. The battle had reached a shocking level. Master. Sensing her master's sword intent, Bai Hongzhu's expression changed slightly. With a graceful step, she disappeared from her original spot. Yi Nishuan also sensed the aura of the battle in the distance. His figure flickered, and he quickly rushed over. In front of the profound secrets pavilion, 2 swords were clashing. The strongest sword was unleashed to its peak, causing the 4 grand elders to become more and more shocked. They really couldn't imagine that such a young man could fight the enforcement elder to a standstill. It was too inconceivable. For thousands of years, there had been countless geniuses, but any genius needed time to grow. This generation's Yi Nishuan and Bai Hongzhu were already incredible geniuses, but compared to the young man in front of them, they were clearly not on the same level. What the 4 of them didn't know was that comparing the current generation with the red-robed young man was unfair to Yi Nishuan and the others. That was because the environment they grew up in was different, and the tribulations they experienced were also different. There was simply no comparison. In the chaotic times of the divine prefecture, great tribulations came one after another. And the people who fought with the knowing destiny realm were never from the younger generation. Talking about it was meaningless. When the battle reached its climax, a purple-robed middle-aged man walked out. Looking at the 2 people fighting, the light in his eyes kept flickering. Sect Master. The 4 grand elders bowed. Have you found out who this person is? Asked Sect Master Yuheng. I've already sent people to investigate, but it'll take some time, said one of the grand elders respectfully. Sect Master Yuheng nodded and didn't say anything else. He calmly watched the rarely seen battle of swords. Sword style, heavenly fall. In the battle, Hong Yi flipped his palm to block the attack. Immediately, he took advantage of the momentum to retreat. He leaped into the air and pointed his finger at the sword. Thousands of sword intents spread out. In the next moment, the sword intents fell from the sky. The terrifying sword aura was as if the 9 heavens had fallen. Xiao Wuming's expression became serious. His true yuan sword, and his sword left his hand and turned into a shield to block the heavenly fall. The 2 attacks collided. Heaven and earth changed color, and the mountain was unable to bear the huge impact. It immediately began to shake violently. Sect Master Yuheng narrowed his eyes and took a step forward. His true yuan spread out, stabilizing the shaking mountain. What a terrifying young man. This kind of height had far surpassed the younger generation. It was unheard of. Not far away, Yin Yishuan and Bai Hongzhu arrived. When they saw the battle, their expressions changed. The two of you should watch carefully. This young man's martial cultivation base might not be as high as the enforcement elders, or even the two of you, but the height of his sword is truly shocking. Even the enforcement elder is a bit inferior, said Sect Master Yuheng seriously. All the experts of the world, from Xiantian to the Three Calamities, walked the same path. But the 3,000 paths of the Grand Tao all led to the same destination. Sometimes, cultivation base wasn't the only factor that determined strength. This young man's sword was truly shocking. Adding on his speed, it wasn't strange for him to be able to fight the enforcement elder to this extent. However, what he cared about the most was that this person still hadn't pulled out his sword. That meant this person still wasn't at his strongest state. Sword style, Nirvana. The Nirvana sword appeared once more. Scarlet swords appeared one after another, transforming into a stream of swords that shot out. Xiao Wuming's eyes narrowed. His left hand pointed forward, drawing in yuan energy to assist his sword. Azure light illuminated the night sky. His sword collided with the Nirvana sword. The sword wheels collided, and the aftershocks cut open one huge ravine after another on the ground. The unimaginable battle of swords caused the ground to collapse. Even with the protection of Sect Master Yuheng and the four Grand Elders, it was difficult to stop the fact that the mountain's appearance was rapidly changing. Outside the battle, Yin Yishuan and Bai Hongzhu were watching with rapt attention. Seeing this terrifying battle, they felt an unprecedented shock. So there was already someone in the younger generation who had reached such a height. Reporting to Sect Master, we've already investigated this person's origin. He's an outer disciple that Crimson Lotus Peak only recruited 3 months ago. He comes from the Eastern Tianshu dynasty. His background and status are ordinary. He should be intentionally hiding something, said a deacon elder respectfully. Sect Master Yuheng nodded. Knowing this was enough. If he hadn't guessed wrong, this person should have come from the other 4 regions. He wasn't someone from the southern tomb. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to not have heard of such a powerful young expert. Wu Ming, there's no need to continue fighting. Stop. Sect Master Yuheng moved and arrived beside Xiao Wuming. He extended his hand and pressed down on the sword he was about to unsheath. Xiao Wuming nodded and did not attack again. He sheathed his sword and stopped fighting. Friend, why don't we talk inside? Sect Master Yuheng looked at the young man in front of him. Deference is no substitute for obedience. Ning Chen nodded and restrained his sword insight as he spoke calmly. Chapter 4:17. Within the profound pavilion, Sect Master Yuheng, Xiao Wuming, and Ning Chen had already been inside for a long time. The 4 Grand Elders were waiting outside, waiting for news. Yin Yishuan and Lian Hongzhu were also waiting outside. Without Sect Master Yuheng's permission, they weren't allowed to enter. No one knew what the 3 of them were talking about. When the sun was about to rise, Hongyi walked out and walked towards the sparring stage at the peak. Sect Master Yuheng and Xiao Wuming appeared after him. Looking at the youth walking away, a complicated light flashed through their eyes. This person's existence had already broken the balance of the 100 dynasties. It was hard to imagine that a youth with ordinary talent could grow to such a terrifying level. Yishuan, Hongzhu, remember today's lesson. In the younger generation, you aren't the ones walking at the very front. In the future, this person will be the peak that no one in your generation can avoid, said Sect Master Yuheng. Yin Yishuan and Lian Hongzhu were silent. Even now, they still found it hard to believe that someone of the same age had surpassed them by so much. At the peak of the mountain, the iron chains swayed and the clouds meandered. One by one, the outer sect disciples who went up to challenge were defeated. The top 10 disciples of the inner sect were all extraordinary people. Only when the real battle began did the outer sect disciples, who had been raring to go before, realize how weak they were. Gradually, fewer and fewer people challenged Hong Yi. On the sparring stage, the 10th inner sect disciple Yun Tianyuan was holding his spear. He had already forced back dozens of people. At this moment, Hong Yi walked onto the stage. His aura was as calm as water, making him seem like the most ordinary person. This greatly shocked the disciples below. Ning Chen greets you. After saying that, his aura changed and a powerful airflow spread out. In the next moment, Hong Yi moved and disappeared. Yun Tianyuan was startled. He only saw a blur approaching him. When he came back to his senses, he had already been pushed off the stage by an irresistible force. Defeating his opponent in one move shocked everyone. Before they could even see the battle clearly, it was already over. As the red-clothed man walked down the stage, the people under the stage automatically parted to make a path for him. Looking at the red-clothed young man walking away step by step, the abnormally oppressive silence quickly erupted into a wave of cheers. Unexpectedly, someone actually succeeded. In the distance, Sect Master Yuheng stood quietly. Looking at Ning Chen walking down the mountain, he said, "Wuming, take him as your disciple." Xiao Wuming's eyes flashed as he calmly said, "This person's attainments in the sword have already surpassed mine. I don't have the qualifications. It's only in name. The 100 Empire competition is about to begin. He needs to have an official identity," said Sect Master Yuheng. "Perhaps we can ask the ancestor to come out of seclusion and let him personally take them in as his disciples," Xiao Wuming suggested. "The patriarch is currently breaking through to the Great Circle. Unless it's absolutely necessary, we can't disturb him." "Let's do as I say for now," said Yuheng. Xiao Wuming nodded and did not say anything else. He turned around and left. As a disciple who had surpassed his master, he felt ashamed to accept the title of master in name. He really didn't know what kind of expert in the world was qualified to be this person's teacher. However, no matter what, Hongzhu did not deserve to be called senior martial sister. The rule of entering the sect first should be changed. At the foot of the mountain, the bamboo cabin was quiet and tranquil. Ruoshi looked at the young lord standing in front of the cabin and asked softly, "Does young lord really wish to participate in this 100 Empire competition on behalf of the Yuheng Holy Land?" "It's just a fair trade. I need to borrow the Alioth Divine Cauldron to save Ghost Girl," Ning Chen said slowly. "Is young lord confident?" Ruoshi reached out and picked up the bamboo leaves that had fallen from her red robes. "Which matter? The 100 Empire competition or saving Ghost Girl?" Ning Chen turned around and asked. "Both," Ruoshi said. "The matter of the 100 Empire competition is hard to say. It's very likely that there will be peerless geniuses like Starfall in the 100 Empire competition. Right now, I only have half of my body. It won't be easy for me to suppress them. As for whether the revival technique will be able to awaken Ghost Girl, although I don't have absolute certainty, there should be at least a 70% chance," Ning Chen replied. Ruoshi's eyes flashed with emotion. She really hoped this was the case. She really didn't want to see the young lord's disappointed expression again. At the peak of the mountain, there were tens of thousands of people competing. After someone successfully defeated the top 10 inner sect disciples, hope rose in the hearts of the outer sect disciples again. There were constantly people going up to challenge them, hoping to obtain the qualifications to compete with the inner sect disciples in the 100 Empire competition. One day after another passed. Ning Chen did not go up the mountain again. It was a pity that Hongzhu came down the mountain. Her master had said that if she wanted to go further on the path of swordsmanship, it would be best for her to go down the mountain and ask this nominal senior apprentice brother. Ning Chen wasn't a person who kept martial arts a secret. Even if Rui Hongzhu asked for advice, he wouldn't keep it a secret. Yun Tianyuan, who was defeated by Ning Chen in one move, also went down the mountain once. Others might not have seen it, but he deeply felt that the strength of the young man in front of him was much higher than his own. Even the enforcement elders couldn't be compared to him. Gradually, the news spread and some inner sect disciples who hadn't met before also came down the mountain to ask for advice. The quiet bamboo hut became noisy. When Xiao Wuming came to know about this, he frowned, but he didn't say anything. Wuming, don't worry. This person isn't a narrow-minded person. He won't be dissatisfied with the Holy Land over such a small matter, Yuheng calmly said. The grand elders were all in seclusion, so they didn't have much time to teach their disciples. Now that a young man with unfathomable strength had appeared, whether it was out of curiosity or because they really had a question about martial arts to ask, the bamboo hut at the foot of the mountain was destined to not be as peaceful as before. Ruoshi, do you know who taught senior brother his martial arts? Rui Hongzhu was sitting on the edge of the bed. She looked at Ruoshi who was cleaning the hut and softly asked. Before personally witnessing the battle at the profound pavilion, she really couldn't believe that there was someone in this world who could fight her master to a standstill with a fourth tribulation Xiantian cultivation. Although her master had held back, her senior brother clearly hadn't used his full strength either. The young master has never taken a master before. He practiced his martial arts on his own. However, there are several seniors who have given him pointers. If you're curious, you can ask him yourself, Ruoshi replied while tidying up the hut. Senior brother doesn't seem to like me very much. I've gone down the mountain so many times, but I've never seen him smile even once, Rui Hongzhu sighed. Miss Ruoshi worries too much. The young master has always been like this. You've only known each other for a short time. If he really smiled at you from the start, then you should be worried. Aside from the people he cherishes, the young master only smiles when he scams people, Ruoshi whispered. As soon as her voice fell, the door creaked open and Ning Chen walked in. Rui Hongzhu, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, immediately stood up. Her beautiful face revealed a respectful expression. Senior brother. Hongzhu, come with me, Ning Chen said. Rui Hongzhu nodded and followed him out. In the bamboo forest, Ning Chen looked at the woman in front of him and calmly asked, How long have you been in the three disasters? Less than 2 years, Rui Hongzhu honestly replied. Ning Chen fell silent. Not bad, but compared to those monstrous geniuses he had seen before, there was still a big gap. His deal with sect master Yuheng was to help the Yuheng Holy Land obtain 3rd place in the 100 Empire competition. The difficulty was not ordinary. The 100 Empire competition had always been extremely fierce. Aside from the various great inheritances of the Southern Tomb, even the great powers of the other 3 regions would secretly send their disciples to compete for a spot. So what level Rui Hongzhu and that Yin Yishuan could reach in the next few days was crucial to whether or not they could obtain a spot in the top 3. Let me see the sword on your back, Ning Chen said. Rui Hongzhu's eyes were a bit suspicious. She took the sword from her waist and handed it to him with a smile. I almost forgot. Senior brother is the sword god. It was Hongzhu's negligence. I should have taken out this sword earlier for senior brother to evaluate. Don't speak nonsense. Ning Chen lightly reprimanded, but didn't take it to heart. Looking at the sheathed sword in his hand, he frowned. The sword wasn't bad. The aura of a king was drawn but not released. It should be a sword once used by a top sword expert. However, the sword was too masculine. It wasn't suitable for Rui Hongzhu. Switch to a different sword. This sword won't be of much help to your strength, said Ning Chen. Rui Hongzhu's eyes flashed with surprise. Her master had also said the same thing. However, this sword had been passed down by her ancestor. She had never been able to find a suitable sword for herself, so she had always used this sword. Please give me some pointers, said Rui Hongzhu respectfully. There's a red divine tree on the mountain. If you want a sword, it'll depend on whether or not you can convince Sect Master Yuheng and the Grand Elders to bring that tree to me, said Ning Chen calmly. Rui Hongzhu's eyes widened. Could senior brother be talking about the blood-stained red sandalwood? Ning Chen gave her some advice and did not say anything else. He turned around and walked into the wooden house. Based on the properties of the red bamboo, this wood was the most suitable divine material. However, whether she could obtain it or not would depend on her ability. At the top of the mountain, the outer sect disciples' challenges came to an end. The inner sect disciples once again began their battles for the spots to enter the 100 Empire competition. Ning Chen would occasionally go up the mountain to complete his mission. Without any surprise or danger, he entered the top 4. At first, everyone was shocked by this young man's sudden appearance. Then they gradually got used to it. Now, they were numb to it. It seemed that even if he defeated Yin Yishuan and Rui Hongzhu, who had always occupied the top 2 spots of the inner sect disciples, it wouldn't be unacceptable. Ning Chen's opponent for the top 4 was the 3rd-ranked inner sect disciple, the young woman. Although her talent didn't lose to anyone, due to her age, she was unable to defeat Yin Yishuan and Rui Hongzhu. There wasn't much suspense in the battle. As soon as Ning Chen went up, he sent the young woman off the martial stage. The huge difference in strength caused the young woman to cry for a long time. The next battle was the battle that everyone had been waiting for. The 2 most outstanding geniuses of the inner sect disciples, Yin Yishuan and Rui Hongzhu, would definitely be able to determine a victor this time. The chains swayed and rustled. The white-robed Yin Yishuan walked onto the martial stage, calmly waiting for the opponent he had been looking forward to the most. 15 minutes, 30 minutes. Almost an hour had passed, but the red bamboo of regret still hadn't appeared. Just as everyone was getting impatient from waiting, a beautiful woman slowly walked over from afar, dragging a huge divine tree behind her. She had finally arrived at the last moment. Chapter 4:18. By Hongzhu's appearance and dragging the blood-stained red sandalwood from the mountain shocked everyone. Rumor had it that the history of this divine wood could even be compared to the jadeite Holy Land. It was so ancient that it could scare people to death. On the battle stage, Yin Yishuan's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't know why Bai Hongzhu had brought this wood. Senior brother. Bai Hongzhu put down the rope in her hand and walked forward respectfully. Ning Chen nodded. He glanced at the divine wood in front of him and said calmly, "Wait a moment. It'll be done soon." After saying that, Ning Chen walked in front of the divine wood. He flipped his palm and the divine wood shattered into pieces. The most durable part, the blood-stained wood core, flew out and landed in Ning Chen's hand. He condensed his energy into his sword finger and sliced down. Wood chips flew everywhere and landed on the ground. In the distance, Xiao Wuming quietly looked at the battle stage. Light flashed through his deep eyes. With this person's age, his attainments in the sword were truly shocking. This wood was tough and durable. He had spent a lot of time cutting it. Only this young man could cut it into a sword so easily. On the mountain peak, tens of thousands of people quietly waited. The sea of clouds churned. Everyone's attention was focused on the battle stage. No one knew when it would start. Chi, chi, the sound of the sword slicing through the divine wood resounded in everyone's ears. Wood shavings flew into the air one after another. The sword embryo gradually took shape and its sharpness was faintly discernible. Under everyone's shocked gazes, Hongyi waved her finger and the divine wood was cut into a strange blade. Not long after, a purple sword with traces of blood appeared. Red light rose from Ning Chen's finger. The extreme temperature of the phoenix fire tempered the sword. "Give me your hand." When the sword was about to be formed, Ning Chen looked at the girl in front of him and said. Bai Hongzhu didn't hesitate at all when she heard that. She extended her hand in front of Ning Chen. Her delicate hand was dyed red. Drops of blood dripped onto the sword. In the next moment, a bloody light shone brightly and illuminated the entire mountain. The strange blade took shape and the wind and clouds changed. The divine wood that had condensed the spiritual chi of the Holy Land for thousands of years suddenly turned into a miracle. Bai Hongzhu gripped her sword and felt as if her heart and sword were connected. Her eyes shined brightly. Only now did she truly understand what her master and senior brother meant by her sword. "I've made you wait for a long time." Yan Hongzhu moved and instantly arrived on the martial stage. She looked at her opponent and spoke. "Please." As soon as he finished speaking, his white robes fluttered, and a cold sword tip swept across the stage. A white sword light pierced into the mind. Hongzhu waved her sword, and with a king sound, the two swords clashed. A violent wind blew, and true essence scattered in all directions. Qi Feng changed his stance, switching from defense to offense. The purple-red sword tip slashed across with a dazzling brilliance. Yin Yixuan took half a step back and turned his sword around. Then, he slashed out again. His sword was full of changes and he was not at a disadvantage at all. The two swords clashed at an extreme speed. 100 moves had already passed, but no one was able to gain the upper hand. It was a deadlock that was difficult to break. Sect Master Yu Heng and Xiao Wuming were watching the battle from afar. They were also attracted by the intense battle. Yin Yixuan has already been in the three disasters for quite some time. There should still be a gap between Hongzhu and him. But now it seems that gap has been closed to the greatest extent, said Sect Master Yu Heng. Hongzhu's sword has allowed her to gain quite a bit of an advantage, said Xiao Wuming honestly. This so-called senior brother of hers has treated her pretty well. But speaking of which, is there really no need to follow the rule of entering the sect first, asked Sect Master Yu Heng. There are exceptions to everything. Hongzhu doesn't deserve to be called senior sister, said Xiao Wuming calmly. While the two of them were talking, the battle on the martial stage had already reached its climax. Both sides were pushing their cultivation techniques to their limits. They were about to draw a final conclusion to this battle that was difficult to determine a victor. Wind and lightning transformation, Emperor returns boundless. Yin Yixuan raised his sword and drew in wind and lightning. White light soared around his body. Dazzling lightning blinded everyone's eyes. Bai Hongzhu didn't dare to be careless in front of her ultimate move. She condensed her yuan into her sword finger and rays of blood-red light refined her sword. A purple-red light soared into the sky. Her ultimate move had appeared at the same time. 100 generations of mountains and mountains, one sword returns to nothingness. The two extremes collided, causing heaven and earth to lose color. Boundless sword intent crazily surged out. Countless runes on the martial stage flickered, as if they had reached their limits. They were unable to withstand the terrifying shockwaves. Ugh! The two of them both retreated, their mouths dyed red. Suddenly, the white sword in Yin Yixuan's hand snapped and slashed across his face, leaving behind a trace of blood. The battle that hadn't been decided yet had ended at this moment. After the sword broke, the result was already decided. "I've lost," said Yin Yixuan as he steadied himself. "It's not that you've lost, but that your sword has lost." Regret flashed through Bai Hongzhu's eyes as she walked off the stage. The inner sect chief-disciple battle had ended. The result was outside of everyone's expectations, but it also wasn't too surprising. Yin Yixuan and Bai Hongzhu's strength had originally been about the same. It wasn't certain who would win. However, a new expert had appeared amongst the inner sect disciples. Whether or not Bai Hongzhu would be able to maintain her position as number one would soon be revealed. On the martial stage, Bai Hongzhu's red robes fluttered in the wind. Looking at the figure in front of her, an awkward expression appeared on her face. She was well aware that the difference in strength between her and her senior apprentice brother was too great. Even some of her moves had been taught to her by her senior apprentice brother. This battle had no meaning at all. I admit defeat. Giving pointers was one thing, but being oppressed in front of everyone was another. Bai Hongzhu didn't have such a hobby, so she directly admitted defeat. The crowd went into an uproar. She admitted defeat without even fighting. That was too unreasonable. Sister Hongzhu, you're not allowed to admit defeat, shouted Jian Shui, who had just been defeated by Ning Chen. Everyone followed the voice and looked over. When they saw that it was this demoness, they immediately seemed to have found their backbone and loudly echoed her. Jian Shui, was the granddaughter of the previous sect master. She had cultivated with the previous generation's grand elders since she was young. In terms of seniority, she was shockingly high. However, due to her young age, she had always been suppressed by Yi Nishuan and by Hongzhu. Today, she had probably lost too miserably, which was why she was so angry. Bai Hongzhu also felt a headache when she saw Jian Shui, cause trouble. She hurriedly sent a voice transmission, Shui, don't cause trouble. Even master might not be able to defeat senior apprentice brother. The difference in strength between us is too great. There's no way we can fight. No. Jian Shui, was still angry, so she couldn't care too much about it. She directly leapt onto the martial stage and looked at the red-robed youth in front of her. She gnashed her teeth. Since he's so strong, then I'm not afraid of having a few more people. Jian Shui, glanced at Yi Nishuan and said, are you coming up or not? Yi Nishuan narrowed his eyes. His figure flashed, and he instantly arrived on the stage. He said calmly, I don't mind joining forces, but I don't know what the elders think. Outside the martial stage, Elder Qingwei and the other deacon elders frowned. It was fine that Jian Shui, was causing trouble, but why was Yi Nishuan also joining in? Elder Qingwei stood up and was about to stop this farce when a dignified voice suddenly sounded in her ears. Don't stop them. Let them be. Elder Qingwei's expression changed slightly when she heard the identity of the owner of this voice. She sat down again. On the martial stage, Ning Chen glanced at the three of them. He didn't say anything and directly walked down the stage. He had already obtained the qualification to participate in the 100 Empire competition and had no obligation to fight again. You're not allowed to go down. How could Jian Shui let him go? Her figure flashed, and she blocked in front of him with her sword. Ning Chen, just fight with them. It's just a piece of cake for you. At this moment, Sect Master Yuheng's voice sounded in Ning Chen's ears. Ning Chen frowned slightly when he heard Sect Master Yuheng's words, but he didn't insist. Seeing Ning Chen stop, Yi Nishuan waved his hand. A green sword flew from below the stage and landed in his hand. He said, please. Jian Shui had been waiting for this moment for too long. She took a step forward, and her sword moved along with her. It was a pity that Hongzhu's eyes also flashed with fighting spirit. She couldn't defeat her senior brother, but with the help of these two people, she might really be able to fight. It was indeed quite embarrassing to admit defeat without fighting. Sect Master Yuheng watched the battle from afar and said calmly, do you think the three of them have a chance of winning? Sect Master, do you think the three of them together can defeat Xiao Wuming? Xiao Wuming didn't answer directly and asked back. He didn't agree with this battle just now. If it was a battle of two different levels, not to mention Ning Chen, even he wouldn't have much interest in fighting. Heh. Sect Master Yuheng chuckled and didn't say anything else. On the martial stage at the peak of the mountain, the three of them joined forces to fight the phoenix. Before their swords arrived, they felt a shocking sword pressure sweeping over. The swords in their hands were immediately blocked. What a monster! Jian Shui, was shocked. She took a step forward and leaped into the air. She channeled her energy into her sword and slashed down with the momentum of falling from the sky. Ning Chen was as still as a mountain. He used his fingers to block the sword. Jian Shui's sword couldn't even move half an inch. Just at this moment, the divine tree's sharp edge appeared behind him. It was so fast that it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Ning Chen turned his body and used his fingers to deflect the force. Jian Shui staggered and her sword clashed with the sharp edge. With a soft sound, the sword shattered. Ning Chen waved his hand and knocked Jian Shui out of the battle. Seeing that the situation was unfavorable, Yin Yishuan didn't continue fighting. He used the advantage of his body and condensed his quintessence to draw lightning into his sword. Ning Chen squinted his eyes and his red clothes instantly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in front of the former. He condensed his quintessence and blocked the sword. With a bang, Yin Yishuan flew out of the martial stage before he could make a move. In the blink of an eye, only Bai Hongzhu was left in the battle. The three young geniuses couldn't last more than a few rounds. The huge gap in strength was revealed once again. This time, Jian Shui didn't mess around. She looked at the broken sword in her hand in a daze. She didn't understand where the gap between them was. Bai Hongzhu's expression also flashed with confusion. She originally thought that she could barely fight with her senior brother if she joined forces. She didn't expect the gap to be so huge. The sword is a weapon to kill. Ning Chen left this sentence and walked down the stage. The gap between them wasn't a secret. It was just that Bai Hongzhu and the others couldn't truly understand it. When they experienced true life and death situations, they would be able to deeply understand what a sword was, and what a weapon for killing was. Chapter 419. Under the bright moon, Ning Chen was sitting in front of a table in a wooden house at the foot of the mountain. He was polishing Yama's sword with the help of a lamp. The sword had been sealed for nearly 10 years. Aside from using it to scare Black Tortoise a few days ago, he hadn't used it again. When fighting with others, swords and blades were ruthless. Injuring and killing were just a matter of thought. He had killed too many people and didn't want to stain the sword in his hand with blood again. Hopefully, in this 100 Empire competition, this sword wouldn't need to be unsheathed again. The reason he came to Nanling this time was to find a way to awaken Ghost Girl. He owed too many favors in this life. No matter what method he used, he had to wake her up. "Young master, are you still not going to rest?" The wooden door creaked as Ruoshi walked in and asked softly. "I'm just about to rest. By the way, Hongzhu and I will be leaving in 2 days. You should come with us," Ning Chen said. "This time it's a serious matter. Ruoshi won't be going. I'll be a burden to you." Ruoshi smiled gently. "It's fine, it's decided." Ning Chen knew Ruoshi's worries and didn't say anything more. Nanling was different from the divine continent. In this strange place, Ruoshi only had him to rely on. He couldn't leave her alone. Moreover, without this girl by his side, he wouldn't feel at ease along the way. Ruoshi's eyes flashed with a trace of joy. Although she didn't want to cause trouble for the young master, she still wanted to go with him. Dang dang. At this moment, there was a knock on the door and a pleasant voice sounded. "Senior brother, are you resting?" "It's Hongzhu," Ruoshi whispered. Ning Chen frowned. Why did she come down the mountain at this time? "Come in," Ning Chen said. Red Bamboo pushed open the door and saw Ruoshi inside. Breathing a sigh of relief, she stepped forward and respectfully said, "This Red Bamboo is here to thank senior brother for gifting me this sword. Thanks to this sword, this Red Bamboo was able to win today's battle. The one you should thank is not me, but your master and sect master Yuheng. My deal with them is to help Yuheng win the top 3 positions in this 100 Empire competition. The stronger you are, the more likely this deal will succeed," Ning Chen calmly said. "Young master, don't keep people at arm's length." Ruoshi couldn't stand it anymore. so she gently punched her young master and whispered, "Hongzhu didn't forget to come over to say thank you even though it's already so late. Don't treat her like a guest, she is still your junior sister." Ever since the eldest grandson passed away, the young master's temperament had become even colder. She was not as good as that concubine, so she could only try to persuade him from the side. "Have a seat." Hearing Ruoxi's reminder, Ning Chen sighed in his heart and softened his tone. Hongzhu gratefully glanced at Ruoxi and sat down at the wooden table. Every time she talked to her senior brother, she would feel very nervous. She was afraid she'd say the wrong thing. After knowing each other for so long, although her senior brother would answer her questions one by one, but no matter how many times she came, his attitude was no different from the first time they met. It was as if he was facing an ordinary stranger. "Senior brother, you should give this sword a name," said by Hongzhu softly as she took out the strange sword from its scabbard. Ning Chen looked at the sword in front of him and fell silent. After a long time, he opened his mouth and said, "Everlasting Fragrance." Hearing this name, Hongzhu was startled at first, but then a dazzling color flashed in her eyes. "Everlasting Youth, is this what it means?" The name was simple and easy to understand. It carried the most heartfelt blessings. Ning Chen had given it a name with great care. After all, they had known each other for a while. Although they were only martial siblings in name, he still sincerely wished that the red bamboo of regret would be like a sword in its scabbard. "Hongzhu likes this name very much, thank you senior brother," Hongzhu softly said. After saying that, it was a pity that Hongzhu hesitated for a moment, but she still carefully said, "Hongzhu understands a little of what senior brother said on the competition platform today, but I can't figure out what deeper meaning it has. I hope senior brother can guide me." Senior brother said that a sword is a weapon to kill, but this didn't seem to be too difficult to understand. She also couldn't figure out why there was such a big gap between them. "If I wanted to kill you, what do you think your chances of surviving are?" asked Ning Chen as he placed the Yama King's sword that he had cleaned on the table. "Not even 10%. Hongzhu thought for a moment, then spoke the truth. Although her cultivation was higher than her senior brother's, the difference in their true strength was too great. Today, on the stage, the feeling of every single move being sealed made them feel deeply powerless. She really couldn't understand why the moves they had bitterly trained for so many years and were so proud of were all flaws in her senior brother's eyes. Could it be that they hadn't trained enough? Wrong. Ning Chen looked at the woman in front of him and explained, "Actually, it's extremely difficult to kill a 3-disaster expert. A person's survival instinct in desperate situations is beyond imagination. The reason you think so is because you've never experienced such a desperate situation before. Back then, in order to deal with the Du-E Temple's abbot, the King of Calamity, the Martial Lord, and the Master of the 4 Extreme Realms, it had been extremely difficult. Even though he had repeatedly set up backup plans, when it came to the actual battle, unexpected variables had still appeared. They were like that, and he was the same. In desperate situations, in order to survive, a person's willpower and potential would become incomparably terrifying. It wasn't even impossible for them to reverse the situation of the battle. Of course, if the opponent's strength reached the level of the Yama King, everything would be different. After all, the difference between a human and a god was not something willpower could change. Your sword will instinctively become the last thing you can rely on when you're in the most dangerous situation. At that time, the essence of the sword will be extremely clear. "Kill your opponent and survive," said Ning Chen calmly. No one would think about nonsense like benevolence, righteousness, and morality when they were in desperate situations. He couldn't do that, and those legendary ancient sages couldn't do that either. Hongzhu seemed to understand, but she didn't. Confusion flashed through her eyes and she said, "Hongzhu still doesn't quite understand. What does this have to do with the difference in strength between me and senior brother?" Ning Chen wasn't in a rush. He patiently said, "Answer the question I just asked you again." There's not even a 10% chance. Hongzhu didn't understand, but she still answered according to her senior brother's words. In truth, from my point of view, it's not that you don't have a 10% chance. But from your point of view, that's the only answer. That's the difference between us right now. Ning Chen paused, thought for a moment, and then explained, the reason you think you don't even have a 10% chance is because you only see your current strength. You don't see your potential. However, this potential will only be revealed when you encounter a true life or death situation. You've never experienced such a situation before, so your current strength is only what you can see. But if there comes a day when you truly encounter a life or death situation, if you're lucky enough to survive, then remember everything you felt at that time. Perhaps it's a move, perhaps it's a comprehension, or perhaps it's the mark of each sword. Carefully remember it in your heart and learn it. Then you can completely transform the potential that erupted during that moment of crisis into a part of your strength. Do you understand now? Ning Chen asked. On the path of martial arts, talent was indeed very important. In this regard, Hongzhu and Luo Xingchen weren't much different. However, the decisive difference between the two was that when Luo Xingchen betrayed the Zhao house, he experienced too many life and death battles. Because of this, his strength also increased by leaps and bounds. In the end, he was even able to compete with several of the Zhao house's third disaster realm giants. Hongzhu nodded and couldn't help but sigh in her heart. These words sounded difficult, but it was probably even more difficult to do. She didn't know what her senior brother had experienced in the past to become so powerful like a monster. The flickering flame was already a little dim. She stepped forward and picked up the wick to make the flame brighter. The young master said that before this 100 Empire competition, how much Hongzhu's strength could improve would be crucial to the final result. She didn't know much about martial arts, but she also knew that the young master only had half of his body left. It would be difficult for him to rely on his own strength to suppress all the opponents from the 100 Empire competition. Whether or not Hongzhu could help wasn't something she could ask for. At the very least, she needed to be able to protect herself while the young master was busy. In the previous 100 Empire competition, there was a strict age limit. This was also why she wasn't too worried about the young master. As long as the opponent wasn't a monster who had lived for countless years, no matter how amazing the genius, the young master wouldn't lose. After the doubts in her heart were answered, Hongzhu finally noticed the gorgeous and noble purple sword on the table. Her face showed a touch of surprise. Senior brother, is this your sword? You can say so. Ning Chen softly responded. This was Yama's sword, and also Ghost Woman's sword. Before she woke up, he would temporarily take care of it. Can I see it? Hongzhu asked. Ning Chen nodded and didn't refuse. Hongzhu took the sword, but before her delicate hand touched the blade, she felt a strong repulsive force. It was divine and holy, and no outsider was allowed to touch it. Yama's two weapons, one sacred and one evil, symbolizing the Lord of Hell's clear distinction between rewarding the good and punishing the evil. In the world, except for Yama, no one could use this pair of sword and saber. Ning Chen could only rely on the holy power of the Phoenix Source to barely gain the sword's recognition. But it was still difficult to display the sword's destructive power when it was in Yama's hands. Perhaps one day, when Ghost Woman woke up, this sword could once again display its stunning glory. Senior brother's sword seems to have not been used for a long time. Hongzhu said as she returned the sword. 10 years, I hope I won't use it this time. Ning Chen's eyes flashed with a touch of darkness. Miss Hongzhu, it's already late. The young master also needs to rest. At this time, Shi, who had been quiet all this time, softly said. Hongzhu was startled, but immediately understood. She got up and said goodbye. Thank you senior brother for clearing my doubts today. It's late at night and the path up the mountain is difficult. Hongzhu will return first. Chapter 420. When they reached the top of the mountain, the day of departure was near. In front of a large formation that had runes revolving around it, the big shots of the Jadoth Holy Land appeared one after another. The two people in the lead were the Jadoth Holy Land's patriarch and Xiao Wuming. Did you tell him? Sect Master Yuheng looked at the regretful Hongzhu and asked. Yes, he should be here soon. Hongzhu nodded. Before he finished speaking, a red-clothed figure walked over from the end of the mountain path at a steady pace. Behind him, an exceptionally beautiful woman followed. Her gentle gaze had only been on her young master from the beginning to the end. What a pervert. Jian Shui still didn't have a good impression of a certain person. She wrinkled her nose. On the side, Yuheng and Xiao Wuming acted as if they hadn't heard anything. Jian Shui, her status was the most special on the mountain. She had the protection of several previous grand elders. No one dared to provoke her. When Ning Chen arrived, he stopped and nodded at the two in front of him. Hongzhu, Shui, it's time. Let's go. Yuheng calmly said. Ning Chen's eyes flashed. What was going on? Shouldn't the person who obtained the last spot be Yi Nishuan? Senior apprentice brother, there was a sudden change. I'll explain it to you on the way. Hongzhu transmitted. Ning Chen nodded and didn't ask any more questions. He bid farewell to Yuheng and Xiao Wuming and brought Ruo Shi to the side of the formation. As the four of them entered the formation was activated. Amidst the dazzling brilliance, the four figures gradually faded and disappeared in the blink of an eye. 3,000 miles north of the Jadeite Holy Land, a formation appeared out of thin air. The four of them walked out and set foot on the ground once more. Finally coming down the mountain, Jian Shui's eyes were filled with excitement. With a flash of her figure, she rushed forward at a rapid speed. After traveling 300 meters, she found that the other three hadn't followed. She couldn't help being puzzled and turned back. Do we have to walk? Jian Shui looked at Hongzhu. Their current location was still very far away from the location of the 100 Dynasties competition. If they walked, it would probably take a few months. Senior apprentice brother. Yan Hongzhu was also worried. She looked at Ning Chen and asked. You go first. Ruo Shi and I will arrive before the 100 Empire competition starts. Ning Chen calmly said. Since senior apprentice brother has chosen to walk, then I will also walk with you. As long as we don't delay the gathering day, it doesn't matter if we arrive early or late. Regretful Hongzhu revealed a faint smile. Seeing this, Jian Shui pursed her lips. Unwilling to travel alone, she could only follow along. Where's Yi Nishuan? Ning Chen asked seriously. The 100 Empire competition this time wasn't child's play. Although Jian Shui's strength wasn't bad at her age, she was clearly much weaker than Yi Nishuan now. Changing people at the last minute would bring them a lot of trouble. Yi Nishuan has gone missing. Even now, his whereabouts are unknown. A trace of graveness flashed through Hai Hongzhu's eyes. Ning Chen frowned slightly. Yi Nishuan's strength was not ordinary. Even he would find it difficult to take him away without anyone noticing. From the looks of it, there were only two possibilities for Yi Nishuan's disappearance. Either he left on his own accord, or the person who took him away was stronger than him. Right at this moment, the clouds in the 9 heavens changed, and thunder rumbled. Amidst the pressure, a gigantic hand descended from the heavens, slamming down. Sensing this terrifying power, Hai Hongzhu and Jian Shui's expressions changed. A huge pressure pressed down on them. At this moment, they didn't even have the strength to fight back. Ning Chen's eyes turned cold. His fingers formed a sword, and a proud sword intent revolved around him. He slashed out with his sword, creating a 300-meter wave. With a bang, the sword intent and the enormous palm collided, causing the heavens and the earth to shake violently. Shocking aftershocks spread out endlessly, and it destroyed everything in an area of 500 kilometers, hiding your head but showing your tail. You don't dare to show yourself. Ning Chen looked at the dark clouds covering the sky. Junior, how arrogant. Amidst the cold words, an illusory figure appeared. His face could not be seen clearly as he floated in the air, covered in a multicolored light. With a flip of his palm, a vigorous true origin pressed down like raging waves, shaking the heavens and earth. Back away. Ning Chen glanced at the three behind him. Red light rose from his body, and a red sword condensed, turning into a stream of light that soared into the sky. The two attacks collided, causing the earth to shake and sand to rise 30 meters into the air. Hong Yi walked out of the sand and stood in the air. Her figure flashed, arriving in front of the illusory figure in the blink of an eye. Her sword light slashed through the air, and a terrifying rift appeared in the air. The illusory figure took the sword light head-on. With a bang, he was forced back half a step. The multicolored light around him dissipated, and his true body appeared. The illusory figure waved his hand, condensing multicolored light to cover his body once more. With a shout, endless true yuan soared into the sky. A divine sword that looked like a blade but wasn't a blade at the same time appeared. The instant it appeared in his hand, heaven and earth shook. In the next moment, the cold sword slashed through the air. Heaven and earth shook, and a large area of space collapsed. Its terrifying power shocked the world. Ning Chen's eyes flickered coldly. He didn't dodge. His sword pierced through the air, and with a clang, he met the divine sword head-on. Raging winds howled endlessly. Hong Yi danced in the wind. Sword intent and true yuan surged, spreading out in circles. The shocking battle was getting more and more intense. It shocked Hong Zhu and Jian Shui. So, this was their senior brother's true strength. The gap between them and the top experts was so huge. The divine sword and the sword fingers crossed each other. In an instant, the battle was so fast that it couldn't be seen clearly. However, the top experts were able to shake the 9 heavens. The killing light that was so fast that it could be destroyed in the blink of an eye kept flashing in front of the two. It was fast, and it was still fast. In a true battle of the top experts, a single mistake would result in death. Seeing that his opponent was extraordinary, the illusory figure condensed his body, and the extreme yuan on his sword surged. His ultimate attack was about to appear in the world. Sword style, sky-breaking. Facing his ultimate attack, Ning Chen's expression turned cold. Sword intent condensed on his fingers, and in an instant, a crescent-shaped blood-colored sword light shot out, drawing a dazzling line of blood in the sky. Wherever it passed, the void would quickly collapse, reaching thousands of feet away. The aftershock of the divine sword style caused the illusory figure to retreat half a step. Rays of light flashed through his eyes. He was amazed by the young man's shocking attainments in the sword. "Junior, you're not bad." The illusory figure coldly snorted. His figure flashed, and the power of breaking mountains suddenly fell. "Thank you for the compliment." Ning Chen put 2 fingers together, clanging against the divine sword. His body leaned to the side, and he took advantage of the momentum to disperse the force. The cold sword was suppressed, and a vigorous palm energy followed. The powerful pressure was like 1,000 mountains descending. It was so heavy that it was difficult to breathe. Ning Chen didn't move. He condensed a sword in his left hand, and thousands of sword intents condensed. He didn't dodge, and faced the falling palm head-on. The moment the 2 attacks collided, heaven and earth wailed, and rumbled. The sound echoed for hundreds of miles. The 2 of them both retreated dozens of feet. Their clothes fluttered, and their auras soared. Sword style, breaking mountains. The inheritance of the sword was even better than the master. Back then in Desolate City, the 3 swords had sowed seeds, and today's results were reaped. Different sword styles, different sword intents, streaked across the sky, and a blood-red light fell. When the divine sword met the sword, it broke. The illusory figure turned his palm to shake the sword. Vigorous true yuan surged, and he received the breaking mountains. The swordsman was extraordinary, and so was the attacker. He had a shocking cultivation base, and he wasn't at a disadvantage. The illusory figure threw away the broken cold sword in his hand, and clasped his palms together. Violent waves surged, and blue waves engulfed heaven and earth. With a single palm strike, the waves reached thousands of feet. The shocking waves split the sky, and their powerful aura reached its peak once again. Ning Chen's figure flickered, and he leapt into the sky. Endless sword intents circled around him, and in the blink of an eye, they condensed into one. The sword was extremely sharp, and it contained the power to cut the sky. The battle between the two was dazzling. Each of their attacks was stronger than the last, and it was shocking. Without the divine sword, the illusory figure used his fist and palm to shake the sword. One fist and one palm strike shook the world. In the blink of an eye, dozens of rounds had passed. The attacker wasn't kind. The swordsman was impatient, and his murderous intent was looming. "Bring out your full strength, I'm tired of fighting." Ning Chen turned his palm and pushed the person in front of him away. With a wave of his hand, Yama's sword appeared in the void. The swordsman's sword appeared, and an extreme pressure spread out, shocking the world. Seeing the divine weapon appear, the illusory figure's eyes narrowed. After weighing the pros and cons, he understood that it was impossible to achieve his goal today. His figure flashed and he quickly retreated. "This battle ends here. I look forward to the next time we meet. You will be so lucky." The last words dissipated with the wind, and the illusory figure left. In a flash, he disappeared without a trace. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes, but he didn't chase. He waved his hand and put away Yama's sword. Then, his feet moved, and he returned to the ground. "Let's go, let's continue on our way." Ning Chen glanced at the three and said. Ruoshi nodded and didn't ask anything. She stepped forward and followed. Yan Hongzhu and Jian Shui recovered from their shock. Looking at each other, they suppressed the doubts in their hearts and quickly followed. "Senior brother, do you know who that is?" On the way, Yan Hongzhu couldn't help but ask. "I don't know, but it shouldn't be directed at me," Ning Chen calmly said. He hadn't been in Nanling for long, so he hadn't incurred any enmity with such a powerhouse. Moreover, they came here through the array of the mountain. Since this person could find them so quickly, it was obvious that he was very familiar with the transmission array of the Jadeite Holy Land. The 100 Dynasties competition was imminent, and the situation was very complicated. There were too many people who could be suspicious. It could be premeditated by other inheritances, or it could be an internal problem of the Jadeite Holy Land. Perhaps, this person's target is me. At this moment, Jian Shui's expression flashed with a touch of sadness. "Shui, don't think too much. It won't happen." Yan Hongzhu sighed softly and comforted. Ning Chen heard a trace of something unusual. He also heard that Jian Shui was the granddaughter of the previous sect master. However, the previous sect master's bloodline was cut off in the generation of Jian Shui's father. They were all killed overnight. The current sect master and law enforcement elder were the direct disciples of the previous sect master. In order to investigate what happened that year, they used almost all the power of the Jadeite Holy Land. However, in the end, they couldn't find anything. Jian Shui was the only surviving orphan. Several previous grand elders personally took care of her because they were worried that another accident would happen. Then it makes sense. After thinking for a moment, a cold light flashed in Ning Chen's eyes. He roughly understood what was going on. Chapter 421. Above the wilderness, the moonlight sprinkled a faint chill. The bonfire flickered, reflecting different bright and beautiful faces. Needless to say, Ruo Shi and Hongzhu, although Jian Shui was a bit unruly, but in terms of appearance, she was also a rare beauty. What happened during the day obviously had a big impact on Jian Shui. At this moment, she was sitting quietly by the bonfire in a daze without saying a word. Ruo Shi stepped forward and comforted her in a low voice. In terms of personality, this courtesan who had once stunned the entire Great Xia imperial city was much kinder than her son. Seeing Jian Shui in a low mood, she couldn't bear it. Jian Shui forced a smile and said, "I'm fine. I just remembered something from the past." Not far away, Ning Chen looked at the eastern night sky and stood silently. His calm and cold aura clashed with the blood red around him, which was extremely contradictory. The phoenix was proud and blazing all its life. However, after transforming into a knowing destiny phoenix, it became indifferent and rational. No one knew whether this was good or bad because no one had ever experienced such a change. Hongzhu looked at the former with a flash of worry in her eyes. In today's battle, when her senior brother was about to hold his sword, the faint killing intent that appeared was terrifying even though it didn't fully erupt. Now, she finally understood why her senior brother had been unwilling to use his sword. She didn't know what her senior brother had experienced in the past. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, it would have been hard to believe that there was such an astonishing killing intent in the world. It was almost condensed into a substance. A person's temperament would change with experience. If one killed too much, their heart would also be killed. For thousands of years, most cultivators who fell into the demonic path were influenced by their own killing intent. However, she had never heard that a person's killing intent could condense into a substance. Even if one fell into the demonic path and killed thousands, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands, a person's strength was ultimately limited. It was impossible for it to be endless. The truth of the world was the cycle of karma. Even if one escaped the pursuit of human experts, it was difficult to escape the cleansing of the heavenly Tao. The more killing intent one had, the more intolerable it would be. Every great tribulation was as difficult as ascending to heaven. Hongzhu couldn't hide the worry in her eyes. Her senior brother was close to the last tribulation of the fifth tribulation realm. Once he reached it, he would definitely attract the most terrifying tribulation. Under the moon, Ning Chen looked into the distance and pondered quietly. Bit by bit, he sorted out what happened today. Judging from the various signs, it was most likely not a coincidence that Jian Shui went down the mountain. Someone had deliberately urged her to do so. Combined with what happened today, it was not difficult to explain Yinishuan's disappearance. There was only one motive, which was for Jian Shui to go down the mountain. 20 years ago, something happened to the previous sect master Yu Heng's lineage, and this woman's safety became the top priority. She was personally protected by a few grand elders of the previous generation. Today was the first time Jian Shui had left the mountain, and the killing intent had arrived. If it was a coincidence, it was truly too coincidental. It was impossible for there to be so many coincidences in the world. Perhaps even the Grand Supreme Elders of the previous generation did not expect that the crisis that had been dormant for more than 20 years would eventually befall Jian Shui. If one were to talk about the person with the greatest suspicion, it would undoubtedly be the current sect master Yu Heng. However, he had seen many hypocrites and true villains, and sect master Yu Heng was indeed not one of them. Of course, this did not eliminate sect master Yu Heng's suspicions. This was merely his intuition. The newcomer had used his true essence to cover his face, not wanting others to know his identity. This made it even harder for sect master Yu Heng to wash away his suspicions. "Young master, if you can't figure it out, then don't think about it," Ruo Shi walked forward and said softly. Ning Chen came back to his senses, and a smile appeared on his face as he nodded gently. Today's matter came too suddenly, and it was difficult to determine the true identity in a short period of time. He could only put it aside for now. The most important thing now was still the 100 Empire competition. Jian Shui, replacing Yin Yishuan's position, was not a small problem for him. Although Jian Shui's talent was extraordinary, she was still limited by her cultivation time. Her cultivation was still at the 5th tribulation realm, and there was quite a gap between her and Yin Yishuan. He was not familiar with the major legacies of South Tomb, but he was not completely ignorant. Not to mention the rest, just the two geniuses of Swallow Song City were not easy to deal with. Nan Mingtian and Bei Gongyu's cultivation were both at the 5th tribulation. In terms of cultivation alone, Jian Shui and Hong Zhu were not inferior to the two of them. In fact, they were even inferior. However, in a real battle, the outcome would be very clear. Among the 3 spots from the Tianshu dynasty, Nan Mingtian and Bei Gongyu should at least occupy one of them with their strength. It was not impossible for them to come together. These two were true geniuses who had grown from battle. Neither of them was someone that Jian Shui could deal with. Hong Zhu was slightly better, but after all, she had the advantage in cultivation. Even if she could not defeat them, she could still protect herself. This time, their opponents were not only the Tianshu dynasty, but also the Migres dynasty, Myriad World Mountain, and countless other legacies. It was hard to say that there were no geniuses who were stronger than Nan Mingtian and Bei Gongyu. There was never a lack of geniuses. Even though he didn't have the condition to guarantee the safety of Hong Zhu and Jian Shui in his deal with Sect Master Jadoth, both of them had extraordinary statuses in the Jadoth hallowed grounds. If any one of them were to suffer an accident, it would be a great variable to their deal. Senior brother, we will enter the territory of the Migres dynasty tomorrow. Migres and Yuheng have always been at odds. We have to be careful. Hongzhu stood up and walked forward, reminding him softly. Oh. A strange look flashed in Ning Chen's eyes. He did not know there was such a thing. The strength of the Migres dynasty was not weak. It seemed that their journey would not be too peaceful. As the night deepened, Ruoshi fell asleep not far from the bonfire. For 10 years, no matter where he went, as long as Ruoshi was by his side, Ning Chen would choose to walk together, just like the most ordinary young master and maid. A mortal's life was far less long than a martial artist's. After experiencing life and death parting again and again, Ning Chen cherished the remaining warmth around him. It was even more important than his own life. The night wind was slightly cold. Only the side of the bonfire was still so warm. The dancing flames crackled from time to time. Ning Chen stood by the bonfire all night, adding firewood from time to time. He was silent. The light of the fire shone on his red clothes, as if it was stained with blood. It was very dazzling. When dawn came, a touch of white rose in the east, gradually dispelling the darkness. Hongzhu and Jian Shui woke up from their meditation. Ruoshi also woke up. Seeing the red clothes on her body, her beautiful face showed a touch of gentleness. Ruoshi got up and put the red clothes on her young master again. She did not say any words of thanks. After so many years of getting along, some words had become unnecessary. Ning Chen looked back and smiled softly. Get ready, let's continue our journey. Ruoshi nodded and responded. It didn't take long for the four to set off on their journey. The boundary of the Migres dynasty was not far. To reach the gathering place of the 100 dynasties, the Migres dynasty was an unavoidable path. Migres and Yuheng were not on good terms. However, Ning Chen didn't care too much. He didn't like to cause trouble, but he also didn't like to avoid it. If he couldn't avoid it, he would just fight. Migres's boundary. The four walked over. In front of the Jia Tian Pass, the Migres dynasty had obviously been waiting for a long time. There were 100,000 soldiers. In addition, one of the 3 disasters and 10 Xiantian masters were there. The powerful formation was shocking. Ning Chen glanced at the sealed pass in front of him and condensed a sword with his finger. A red brilliance rose, and the sword split the sky. The giant gate in front of the Chaotian Pass was split open with a bang. A large number of soldiers were shaken out and smashed to the ground. The sword was merciful and didn't take their lives. The soldiers who were sent flying stood up awkwardly and looked at the red-clothed young man in front of them with horror. The gate was broken, and the three disasters took action. A heavy oppressive force fell from the sky. 10 Xiantian masters then appeared. Their auras were connected and blotted out the sky. Hongzhu, Jian Shui, I'll leave it to you. Follow me as soon as possible. Ning Chen said to the two of them, and then no longer said anything. He took Ruoshi step by step and walked into the pass. The soldiers formed a formation and blocked the red-clothed young man in front of them. However, where the red-clothed young man passed, sword intent and surging streamers shook away all the obstacles in his way. Even the molten iron waves couldn't stop the red-clothed young man's advance. Seeing this, the leader of the three disasters looked serious. His figure flashed and instantly appeared above the red-clothed young man. His heavy palm fell with the momentum of breaking mountains and rivers. Your opponent isn't me. Ning Chen raised his hand and condensed sword intent to block the heavy palm. Immediately, the sword momentum changed and a cold sword light swept out, forcing the attacker to retreat. In an instant, the enemy was pushed back by a sword. Not Ling Jifang followed up. Unfortunately, Hongzhu blocked in front of the enemy with her sword. On the other side, Jian Shui faced 10 Xiantian masters. The battle had just begun and reached a climax. Ning Chen no longer paid attention to them and left with Ruoshi. Young master. After passing through Jia Tian Pass, Ruoshi couldn't help but look back. Her eyes flashed with worry. Isn't the young master pushing them too hard? Don't worry, the two of them will have to go through this sooner or later. Compared to the opponents they may encounter in the future, these people today aren't too strong. Ning Chen calmly responded. Ruoshi sighed softly and said no more. She knew how much her young master had suffered to reach this point. She really couldn't bear to see these two walk the same path. As the two moved forward, the sound of battle behind them was incessant. The shaking of the earth indicated the intensity of the battle. However, Hong Yi never looked back. Step by step, they gradually walked away. In front of Jia Tian Pass, not Ling Jifang fought against Migres dynasty's consecrator. Unfortunately, Hongzhu hadn't been in the three disasters for long. Her cultivation didn't have the advantage. Although her sword was strange, it was difficult for her to gain the upper hand. On the other side of the battle, Jian Shui was besieged by 10 Xiantian masters. Her sword was restrained, and the situation wasn't optimistic. Outside Jia Tian Pass, in a pavilion more than 20 miles away, Ning Chen and Ruoshi sat at a stone table, waiting quietly. At this moment, a man in black clothes and a black hat came from afar. Without invitation, he walked into the pavilion and sat down. Are you in a hurry? The man asked. Yes. Ning Chen nodded. 100 Empire competition? The man asked again. Yes, are you also? Ning Chen said lightly. Heh. The man pressed the black hat on his head. His eyes flashed with a cold smile. My age has passed. I'm not qualified. Chapter 422. In a pavilion in the wilderness, two people sat opposite each other. One was dressed in red, while the other was dressed in black. Their conversation was as calm as water, but an indescribable atmosphere spread out in the pavilion, making it hard for people to breathe. The man who had suddenly arrived was different from the experts he had seen before. His killing intent was condensed but not released. It was not targeted, but the bloodiness that had accumulated over many years. "How should I address you?" Ning Chen asked calmly. "Yi Jingdo." "Perhaps you can also call me the third sect master of Yuluo," Yi Jingdo replied. "So it's the third sect master of the Yuluo life extermination sect. I'm honored to have you here," Ning Chen said without much surprise. "You're too polite. I've also heard of your reputation." "As expected, heroes come from the young," Yi Jingdo said calmly. "Third sect master is too kind." Ning Chen's eyes narrowed slightly as he said, "Since third sect master has personally come, it means that Hong Wulei has lost. I didn't expect her to be so impatient in the end. She is indeed a little too impatient. Perhaps in another 10 years, she will succeed." As he spoke, admiration and regret flashed through Yi Jingdo's eyes. In just a few months, Hong Wulei's growth had already amazed him. He had originally wanted to see how far this vengeful seedling could grow. Unfortunately, Hong Wulei had chosen to challenge her in advance, making him unable to convince himself to continue tolerating her. He had killed her parents. Of course, he was very expensive. If he wanted to kill someone, someone had to be able to pay the price. Yi Jingdo tapped his finger on the stone table and said calmly, "I'm very curious about the person who taught her the sword moves. Seeing him today is a pleasant surprise. However, business is business. I wonder if you are interested in Hong Wulei's life." "What's the price?" Ning Chen asked calmly. "Your hands that use the sword." A cold smile flashed through Yi Jingdo's eyes as he replied. "Oh." Ning Chen raised his eyebrows slightly and said with a faint smile, "Third sect master, do you think Hong Wulei is worth this price?" "To me, it's not, but to you, it might be worth it," Yi Jingdo replied. "Third sect master's ability to ask for sky-high prices is impressive. I just don't know if your sect has the ability to accept this price." Ning Chen smiled as he said indifferently. Since he dared to open his mouth, Yuluo extermination naturally has the appetite to swallow any consequences. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Jie's fingers, which were tapping on the stone table, stopped. The aura on his body moved slightly, and his black robe fluttered. A sword that was hidden deep in its scabbard could be vaguely seen. The powerful sword will had yet to be revealed, but it made people feel a deep chill. The number one swordsman of Yuluo's life extermination gate had the guts to do so, but he also had the ability to do so. The stalemate situation was on the verge of breaking out. Ruoshi's mind was clear and she consciously retreated to the side. Just as the great battle was about to begin, Yi Jingdo suddenly retracted his aura. A cold smile appeared on his face as he stood up and said, "It seems like today is not the time to talk business. When you have the sincerity to talk business, the Yaoyuo life extermination cult will look for you again. Then I ask third sect master to keep this bargaining chip. Although I don't think Hong Wulei has much value, maybe one day I'll change my mind and pay a visit to your sect," Ning Chen said lightly. "Yi Jia awaits your arrival at any time." As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Jingdo turned and left. After 2 steps, he disappeared. Ning Chen's eyes looked in the direction of the former's departure. A cold light flickered in his eyes. This person was not easy to deal with. At the very least, his strength was not inferior to Xiao Wuming's, or even stronger. It was rumored that among the 3 sect masters of Yuluo's life extermination sect, Yi Jingdo's cultivation in the sword was the most unfathomable. Hong Wulei was too impulsive. In the face of such a powerhouse, how could he take the risk to challenge him before his wings were fully developed? On the side, Ruoshi's eyes flashed with worry, but she didn't say anything. She knew that this Yuluo's life extermination sect was very powerful. She couldn't cause trouble for her young master. "Don't worry, Hong Wulei will be fine for the time being. After the 100 Empire competition is over, I will seriously consider this matter." Ning Chen looked at the woman beside him and promised. Although he didn't care too much about Hong Wulei's life or death, he couldn't ignore Ruoshi's feelings. A trip to Yu Luo's life extermination sect would bring a lot of trouble, but it wasn't impossible. "Thank you, young master," Ruoshi said gratefully. Ning Chen smiled gently and said, "It's what I should do. I can't call you young master for nothing. I have to do something." Outside the pavilion, the scorching sun gradually moved to the west. Seeing that another day was about to pass, in the distance, Yan Hongzhu and Jian Shui were finally caught up. Both of them seemed to have suffered some injuries. Their breaths were chaotic, sometimes strong and sometimes weak. "Not bad." Ning Chen nodded without leaving a trace. What these two lacked the most was the tempering of real battles. In the future 100 Empire competition, the test would be extremely harsh. Being able to take the first step today was a good thing after all. Yan Hongzhu and Jian Shui were caught up and immediately sat down to adjust their breathing, stabilizing the chaotic breaths in their bodies. Ning Chen wasn't in a hurry. He patiently waited for the two to wake up before continuing on the road. Fortunately, the two didn't spend too much time. After a quarter of an hour, Yan Hongzhu and Jian Shui woke up one after another, barely suppressing the injuries in their bodies. "Let's go. Before it gets dark, try to get to the nearest city." Ning Chen greeted the two and immediately took Ruoshi to the north. Yan Hongzhu and Jian Shui got up and stepped forward to follow. Late at night, in a strange and desolate place, a strange mountain city was located on top of it. It was strange and magnificent, like a city of immortals in the human world, but also like a city of demons. A cold wind blew, and a black stream of light flashed. A cold murderous aura came out. Yi Jingdu, dressed in black clothes and a black hat, stepped into the city in front of him. The city of assassins, Yu Luo Life Extermination Sect, the most terrible forbidden area in the southern tomb. Today, the three sect masters returned and silently walked into a hall. With a rumbling sound, the door of the hall opened. In the dark hall, rows of red candles were lit, illuminating the silent hall. Yi Jingdu walked into the hall. After a few steps, he stopped. "Fengdu, how is it?" At this moment, a beautiful young woman appeared and asked. "Unfathomable, a great enemy." Yi Jingdu replied. "Oh. I've never seen you have such a high evaluation of anyone. It seems that this young man is really not simple." "Interesting." Mei Yingshua's mouth curved into a smile. Fengdu advises second sister that this person is not easy to deal with. He's not someone you can play with. Be careful not to set yourself on fire. Yi Jingdu lightly said. Men always have weaknesses. Sometimes, a woman's body can be a better killing weapon than the cold sword in your hand. Mei Yingxue chuckled. Oh, I've said what I should say. I have no right to interfere with second sister's decision. Take care of yourself. Yi Jingdu raised his hand and pressed the edge of his black hat. Without saying anything more, he walked towards the back of the hall. In the hall, the red candles flickered, reflecting a charming face. Mei Yingshue's eyes flashed with a touch of playfulness as she looked towards the distant north. It had been a long time since she had met someone so worthy of killing. Days without waves were really lonely and unbearable. In the territory of the Migres dynasty, the road to the north was long and far. Half a month later, in the boundless wilderness, the four of them met a caravan that was also heading north. The leader was a middle-aged man around 40 years old. He was friendly and hospitable and dragged the four of them along. Ning Chen did not refuse, but he did not expect to cause a lot of trouble for himself. In a caravan, under normal circumstances, it was not allowed to bring a wife or daughter. However, the middle-aged man leading the caravan this time, in addition to delivering goods, also happened to be on the way back to the ancestral home to visit his relatives, so he brought his wife along. The leader's wife, Yao Shi, looked very young, only around 30 years old. She was very charming and did not lose out to Ruoshi. She was very enthusiastic towards Ning Chen and the others who were traveling along the way, so enthusiastic that it was a little unbearable. In just a few days, the four women had gotten along well with each other, whispering to each other and giggling. After rushing for 3 days, the group arrived at the most prosperous hinterland of the Migres dynasty. The caravan stopped in Ilan city to rest temporarily. The night was like water, and the lights were waning. In the room, Hong Yi sat quietly at the table, her eyes looking at the flickering lights. No one knew what she was thinking. It was late at night, and most of the people in the caravan had fallen asleep. After rushing for so many days, everyone was exhausted and went back to their rooms early to rest. Dang dang, at this moment, the door was knocked, and a charming voice sounded from outside the door. "Young Master Ning, may I come in?" Hearing the voice of the person who came, Ning Chen frowned slightly. This lady, why did she come at this time? With a creak, before the person in the room could answer, Ao Shi had already pushed the door and entered. Her charming face had a gentle smile, and she was wearing a thin red and pink dress, looking very charming. "Sister Roa, she is asleep, so I was worried that no one would take care of you. I'm not used to it, so I came to ask if you need anything." Yao Shi stepped forward and said softly. "Thank you for your concern, Madam Yao. I was just about to go to sleep. There's nothing I'm not used to. It's getting late, so please go back and rest early." Ning Chen wasn't a fool. Naturally, he could see that Madame Yao didn't just come to greet him. There was no euphemism in her words, and she directly sent him off. Yao Shi gently laughed and took 2 steps forward. Arriving in front of the young man in front of her, she wrapped her arms around his neck and bowed, saying, "Young master, to keep people 1,000 li away, isn't that too impolite? Also, tell me, if I shout right now and say that it was young master who forcefully brought this servant here, who would everyone believe?" With a warm jade in his arms, Ning Chen's eyes gradually turned cold. "Madam, do I look like someone who's afraid of being criticized?" "Heh, if young master isn't afraid of being criticized, then are you not afraid of Sister Roa Shi misunderstanding?" Yao Shi's body leaned closer until her whole body was in his arms. Her soft body pressed against the former's chest as she whispered. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed, and a dangerous light flickered in them. "Then what does madam mean? What should I do?" "A night of pleasure, sharing the joy of being intimate. Speaking of which, young master won't lose out." Yao Shi's red lips stopped next to the former's ear. Chapter 423. As the saying goes, wine is poison to the intestines and lust is a steel knife to the bone. Ning Chen wasn't someone who was easily bewitched by beauty, but this woman definitely wasn't Madame Yao. With a soft and fragrant body in his arms, the seductive fragrance of orchids constantly lingering at the tip of his nose, Ning Chen's eyes grew colder and colder. He was very curious, how could there be such a bold woman in this world? No one can deny Madame Yao's charm. She was at her most mature and beautiful age, charming and charming. Unfortunately, a blockhead like Ning Chen was an example. Heaven knows, if this woman was Roa Shi, Mu Qingxue, or a man, would a certain someone still be so indifferent? Unfortunately, the women Ning Chen knew either had a cold temperament or a pure heart. None of them would think of using such means to charm others. In the next room, Roa Shi woke up. Originally, she wanted to see if her young master was asleep. But when she saw the light in his room was on and the door wasn't closed, she was about to knock on the door. However, she suddenly stopped when she heard a voice from inside the room. She could recognize Madame Yao's voice, and of course she could also recognize her young master's voice. It's already so late, what is Madame Yao doing in her young master's room? Through the gap in the door, she could clearly see the situation inside the room. She didn't know if Madame Yao deliberately didn't close the door or if she forgot. At this moment, Roa Shi was standing in front of the door, quietly watching the scene in the room. A faint smile flashed across her beautiful face. She knew her young master's temperament better than anyone else. If he was really greedy for beauty, then he wouldn't have quarreled with his eldest grandson in the heavenly mandate palace. There were many beautiful women in this world, but among those she had seen, there were two that surpassed everyone. One was Mu Qingxue, and the other was the 9th princess of the Xia kingdom, Xia Xinyu. Needless to say, Mu Qingxue's temperament and appearance were extraordinary. The only one who could stand shoulder to shoulder with her was the stunning 16-year-old 9th princess of the Xia kingdom. Unfortunately, her young master was a blockhead. When his eldest grandson appointed the marriage, he rejected this marriage that in her eyes was a match made in heaven. Looking at the current situation, she didn't need to think to know that her young master was forced. Because Madame Yao was just an ordinary person, he didn't want to show his skills and only hurt her. Ruoxi's mouth curved into a smile. She didn't intend to push the door open and disturb the young master's good time. Anyway, she can't sleep if she goes back now. Might as well watch the show. Inside the room, Ning Chen could feel Ruoxi's aura outside the door. Seeing that the girl didn't come in to help him, he couldn't help but feel angry and amused. This girl's burden was too big. She was actually laughing at him. "Teacher, please respect yourself." Ning Chen reached out to push Yao Shi away. Just as he was about to get up, his breathing suddenly became sluggish, and his entire body felt weak. "Young master, tonight you are mine." Yao Shi gently smiled. Her arms were soft and boneless, as they wrapped around the former once more. Her entire body leaned forward once more. Her red lips parted slightly, and the fragrance of spring filled the room, causing the fire in one's body to rise rapidly. Poison. Ning Chen felt the unusual changes in the phoenix's body and narrowed his eyes. It seemed that he was blind this time. Although there were many strange poisons in the world, the ones that could affect an innate rancor could be counted on one's fingers. This Madame Yao obviously came prepared. When did Madame realize that I have martial arts? Or rather, what is Madame's objective? Ning Chen asked indifferently. Does young master have martial arts? This servant really didn't know. If young master is worried about this aphrodisiac, then you can rest assured. As long as young master and this servant have a night of pleasure, this poison will naturally be cured. Outside the room, Ruoxi noticed that the situation inside the room was a bit strange. Not daring to be careless, she immediately pushed the door open and walked in. "Ruoxi, you go out first." Ning Chen's expression changed slightly. With a flip of his palm, he wanted to send Ruoxi out of the room. Unexpectedly, Yao Shi waved her delicate hand and dispersed the former's palm. Her delicate face flashed with a charming smile. "Young master doesn't need to send sister Ruoxi out. This servant doesn't care if there is one more person to serve young master. So Madame also knows martial arts. To be able to hide it so perfectly, this servant is impressed." Ning Chen's eyes flashed with a cold light. Aside from Fan Lingyu who had the Book of Chaos, this was the first time he saw someone who could hide their martial arts aura so flawlessly. "Young master overpraises me. To walk the Jianghu, one must have some ability. However, this servant's performance in bed will make young master even more impressed." Yao Shi reached out to touch the former's handsome face. Her eyes were full of splendor. Such a young master was truly shameful. Countless old monsters who had lived for hundreds of years would die of shame. But for this night, this person was hers. To be honest, she was really reluctant to kill this infatuating young man. Unfortunately, such a young master was too much of a threat. Once he escaped the influence of the aphrodisiac, she wasn't sure she could suppress him. Ning Chen felt the killing intent from Yao Shi at this moment. Flatly, he said, "It seems that after tonight, this servant's life will also be given to Madame. This is the only way. However, before tonight is over, this servant will let young master taste the best taste in the world." Yao Shi smiled, her tone not without regret. Then before I die, can this servant know Madame's true identity? So I can be a ghost under your skirt? Ning Chen finally asked. Yao Shi leaned forward and gently said, Young master, please carefully remember this servant's name. This servant's surname is Mei, and my name is Ying Shui. I am the second sect master of Yu Luo's life extermination gate. Many thanks. This servant will remember. When erecting a monument for Madame, there is no need to replace it with a nameless monument. As he spoke, Ning Chen stood up. Red phoenix flames rose around his body, burning away the strange poison on his body. In the next instant, a red light flashed past. A sword was pointed at his throat. Mei Yingshui's eyes narrowed. Before she could recover, a strand of hair flew up and quietly scattered. The sword intent penetrated her body, and blood dripped down like plum blossoms in winter. It was dazzling. Whether it was Mei Yingshui or Mei Yingshui, it was impossible to tell. She did not understand just what had gone wrong. How could he still have the strength to attack after being poisoned by the aphrodisiac? Within the silent hall of Yu Luo's life extermination gate, a life tablet cracked and fell onto a table. Spiritual energy silently dissipated. In front, a black-clothed man with a black hat looked at the cracked life tablet on the table. His cold face did not change at all. After looking at it for a moment, he turned and left. He had already warned her, but she still insisted on doing it. She could not blame anyone. Bang! The door to the hall closed while the rows of candles were completely extinguished, causing the hall to return to a cold and silent state once more, and there wasn't a trace of aura left. In the inn's room, Ning Chen glanced at the lifeless Mei Yingshui lying on the ground. With a flip of his palm, a phoenix shadow appeared behind him. A red light flashed and temporarily swallowed her into the phoenix's body. Just as the figure of the phoenix disappeared, a familiar fragrance suddenly wafted into his nose from behind. Before he could react, a warm and delicate body leaned close to him and hugged him. Young master, Ruoshi's red lips parted slightly. Her eyes gradually blurred and her body temperature continued to rise. Half of her clothes were undone, revealing a large area of snow-white skin. Ning Chen, who could deal with Mei Yingshui indifferently and unmoved, couldn't help but feel his heart sink at this moment. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. This is troublesome. He almost forgot about this girl. Although he had the phoenix flames and was not afraid of any strange poison, this girl was not. Worried about hurting Ruoshi, Ning Chen didn't dare to force her away. Reluctantly, he turned around and tried to break free from the former's grasp. The process was very difficult. Ruoshi's arms were tightly wrapped around him. Every time he broke free, she would hug him again. Her snow-white skin was faintly discernible. A certain person was not a saint. The cold sweat on his forehead indicated that he was not a gentleman. In fact, Ruoshi's heart was easier to see than anyone else. As long as she could stay by young master's side, she didn't care about anything else. She just wanted to be young master's maid who served tea and water. She didn't want to go one step further. After a long time, Ning Chen reluctantly broke free from Ruoshi and placed her on the bed. Just as he was about to circulate his energy to help her expel the poison, he didn't expect a pair of arms to wrap around him again. Young master, Ruoshi's clothes had slipped down most of the time. The skin under her underwear was faintly discernible. It made one's blood boil. Your young master must have owed you in a previous life. Ning Chen smiled bitterly. Once again, he grabbed the entangled arms and broke free. While enduring the torture of his maid, he circulated his energy to expel the poison. The process of expelling the poison was extremely difficult. It took nearly half an hour. It wasn't until dawn broke that Ning Chen barely forced the aphrodisiac out of Ruoshi's body. His clothes were soaked in sweat. It was more difficult than fighting with a powerhouse of the three disasters. After the aphrodisiac was dispersed, Ruoshi fell into a deep sleep. Ning Chen used his phoenix energy to adjust her body. After replenishing her vitality, he leaned against the bed and closed his eyes for a short rest. An hour later, the sky outside the door was already bright. It was a pity that Hongzhu and Jian Shui didn't see Ruoxi's figure. When they found that Ning Chen's door had not been opened, they immediately understood. Sure enough, it's a pervert. Jian Shui wrinkled her small nose and said. She knew that Ruoxi would not be able to escape the claws of this pervert. How could there be a man in this world who wasn't lustful? Not to mention, Ruoxi was a woman who could make any woman's heart flutter. In the room, Ruoxi woke up. After a short period of confusion, memories came flooding back. Thinking of her performance last night, her face suddenly turned red. When Ruoxi woke up, Ning Chen also felt it and opened his eyes. Seeing the girl's red face, he stood up and couldn't help but smile. Now you know to be shy. Last night, your young master wasn't light. Young master, don't laugh. You go out first, I want to put on my clothes. Ruoxi's face was very hot. She covered half of her face with the quilt and said. Oh. Ning Chen no longer teased the girl and turned to walk out the door. Beast. Seeing the former finally willing to come out, Jian Shui whispered softly. Ning Chen didn't care about it. No matter how beastly he was, he wouldn't be a beast to her. Not long after, the door creaked open again. Ruoxi walked out with a red face. When she saw the three people waiting outside the room, her face immediately became redder. Jian Shui was surprised. Seeing that the former's virginity was still intact, she couldn't help but glance at Ning Chen and spit out 4 words in disdain, worse than a beast. Chapter 424. Under the plum tree, Ning Chen waved his hand and a red light flashed. Mei Yingxue was sent out of the phoenix's body. Then, with a flip of his palm, the ground in front of him cracked open and swallowed the body of Yu Luo's second master. Hongzhu and Jian Shui were shocked and didn't understand what was going on. Ruoxi sighed softly and explained what happened last night. The young master sealed his sword for 10 years so that he wouldn't kill anyone. He didn't expect that he wouldn't get what he wanted in the end. The plum tree swayed and rustled. Ning Chen stood under the tree and waved his hand to build a new grave. He carved a wooden tablet and placed it in front of the grave. Hopefully, when the plum blossoms bloom next year, the cold plum blossoms reflect the snow. Let's go. Ning Chen turned and walked back. He called out to the 3 and then continued to walk forward. In the divine continent, 10 years had passed. The emperor of the Great Xia had grown up. His political and military skills were not inferior to the sages of the past. He tried his best to govern the country that was greatly damaged by the divine tribulation. Kong Yu and Marquis Anling did their best to assist the emperor in governing the country. The fate of the Great Xia gradually recovered. Above the heavenly mandate palace, purple clouds appeared again. In the north and south, the northern Meng imperial court and the barbarian dynasty had also reached their peak. After the divine tribulation, the divine continent finally survived the most difficult time and showed signs of a new era. In front of the Ascension Valley, figures appeared one after another. They were all comrades who fought against Pluto. Today was the last time they met before parting. Have you decided? Mu Qingxue looked at the red-haired man in front of him and asked. Yes, Wan Fengchen nodded and sighed, there can't be any more wars. Sealing the 2 realms is the best choice. Mu Qingxue didn't say anything else. He looked at the 3 people in front of him and said seriously, see you never. See you never. Daylily and Meng Xuanji showed a nostalgic smile and said goodbye. In the next moment, the yearning blade appeared in Wan Fengchen's hand. Majestic and colorful fate gathered the fate of the entire realm. Today, the passage between the 2 realms would be completely sealed. Daylily walked forward and gathered the spirit energy in 100 miles around her blade. In an instant, an endless stream of energy burst out and entered the space passage in front of them. The energy of the world and the fate of the entire realm poured in. The passage between the two realms trembled and gradually disappeared. Let's go. Since the two territories were about to be sealed, they could not stay for long. Wan Fengchen called out to the two people beside him and walked in. Wang Yu and Meng Xuanji nodded. They took one last look at the beautiful divine land in front of them and followed after him. 3 figures, one in front and 2 behind, disappeared into the space channel. The son of the Holy Land who looked up at peace, the flawless Taoist figure that was rarely seen in 1,000 years, and the stunning dream lord of the highest heavens, returned to the 4 poles and stayed away from the disputes of the human world. After the 3 of them entered, the spatial tunnel disappeared. A pure white divine weapon flew back and stabbed into the ground. Please return this saber to him. Many thanks. His final voice reverberated between heaven and earth. A cold wind blew past, dissipating without a sound. Mu Qingxue silently walked forward and pulled out the saber of remembrance. Her beautiful eyes flashed with a sigh. In the blink of an eye, her white clothes scattered and disappeared. In the ruins of desolate city, white light gathered and a beautiful figure walked out. Step by step, she walked to the front of the collapsed sword pool. 10 years had passed and everything was different. The scenery was still the same but the people had changed. In front of the sword pool, a figure who had been waiting for a long time appeared. It was Jian Luiying, Jian San, who had been expelled from Desolate City by Mu Bai. He had been guarding Desolate City for 10 years, guarding this final memory. Where's second senior brother? Asked Mu Qingxue softly. He left 10 years ago. He said he was going to search for eldest senior brother's unfinished Tao. Jian Luiying sighed. What about you? Do you still want to stay here? Asked Mu Qingxue. Yes. Jian Luiying nodded. He looked at the dilapidated fences and dilapidated walls around him and a look of reminiscence appeared on his face. He said, Honored Master said that my temperament is not stable, so it has always been difficult for me to understand the true meaning of the sword. All these years, only here can I settle down and seriously experience the sword that Honored Master taught me. After talking for a short while, Mu Qingxue left. Under the moonlight, her white clothes were whiter than snow. She looked like a fairy from the Moon Palace as she headed west. Jian Luiying looked at the departing junior sister with a complicated expression. After this farewell, he did not know when they would meet again. He hoped that she would live a happy life. Great Xia Imperial City, Jiming Manor. Jiming had left 10 years ago. However, as the only martial Marquis of the previous generation and the teacher of the current Emperor of Great Xia, no one dared to disrespect him. After hearing that her eldest grandson had passed away 10 years ago, Mu Qingxue fell silent. She knew that he might not come back. In the imperial city of Great Xia, in the newly built Heavenly Mandate Palace, the former little Qi had now grown into a handsome young man. He wore a dragon robe and looked very heroic and extraordinary. At this moment, a beautiful figure in white appeared out of thin air in the main hall. Looking at the young man on the dragon throne, a hint of emotion flashed in her eyes. It turned out that it had really been 10 years. Even this little fellow had grown so big. Seeing the woman who suddenly appeared, Xia Qi's body shook. In the next moment, his face was filled with disbelief. He said subconsciously, Mistress. When he was young, he had seen this ridiculously beautiful woman in the Marquis estate and had a deep impression of her. At that time, because he mistakenly called her master's wife, he was caught by Aunt Shi and beaten for a long time. Don't learn from your master and talk nonsense. Mu Qingxue reprimanded him lightly. He did not argue with the child and said calmly, Where is Miss Qing? 3 years after master left, Aunt Qing also left. At this point, Xia Qi felt that something was wrong and quickly changed the way he addressed Mu Qingxue. I don't know where Aunt Qing is now. Mu Qingxue frowned. Had they all left? How was he going to return this saber? The white clothes scattered and disappeared without a trace. Just like when she came, it was so quiet that no one could detect her aura. Xia Qi was shocked again. The beautiful mistress left just like that. In the north of the Migres dynasty, Ning Chen's group, who had been traveling for more than 10 days, arrived at an ancient small city. The autumn rain blurred their vision. The small city with a long history was located in a remote area. Although it was not prosperous, the people lived and worked in peace. They worked when the sun rose and rested when the sun set. It was like a paradise that was rarely disturbed by the disputes of the outside world. As soon as Ning Chen walked into the small city, he immediately felt a bone-deep pressure. His expression immediately turned solemn. Xiantian full circle. There was no mistake. Falsehood could not be captured. It was exactly the same feeling when the teacher stood in front of him. If he did not have the body of a phoenix, he might not even be able to detect it. The sound of an old teacher teaching in a private school, the sound of a man swinging a hammer in a blacksmith shop, and the sound of an old monk chanting scriptures in a dilapidated temple, all of them reached Ning Chen's ears. It was difficult to distinguish who was real and who was fake. It was a pity for Hongzhu. Although Jian Shui's cultivation was higher, she was limited by her physique and strength. She could not sense anything wrong. Ruo Shi saw that her young master's expression was a little strange and immediately realized that there might be unknown dangers around. We can't stay here for long. Let's continue. Ning Chen originally planned to stop and rest for the night, but he changed his mind at this moment and continued to lead the three people forward. Ruo Shi stopped Ruo Shi when she was about to ask. She knew that her young master would not make such a decision easily. They were afraid that they were really in danger now. Clang, clang. The sound of forging in the blacksmith shop became louder and louder. The sound of the old monk chanting scriptures in the dilapidated temple also became more and more ear-piercing. The old teacher in the private school was also chanting sages' scriptures. Countless sounds echoed in Ning Chen's ears. The city was like a maze. Half an hour later, the four people returned to their original place. They were unable to move half a step forward. Only then did Ruo Shi and Jian Shui realize that something was wrong. It was impossible to get lost in the Xiantian realm. They were obviously trapped in the game of the strong. All forms are falsehoods. If you see that all forms are not true, then you will see the Buddha. At this moment, the ancient city changed. Golden light sprinkled down as the venerable of the world chanted. Buddhist rain fell from the sky, purifying the sins of the world. However, only the four people could hear and see it. Endless phoenix fire rose around Ning Chen's body, protecting the three people around him and resisting the purification of the Buddhist rain. Subhuti, if you are a kind man or a kind woman, you will recite this scripture. If you are a contemptible person, then you will have sinned in your previous life and will fall into the evil path. Since you are a contemptible person in this world, the sins of your previous life will be eliminated. You will be worthy of Anyatarasamyak Subhuti. Subhuti, if I recite the past, the infinite monk is only a tribulation. Therefore, before the lamp of Buddha, it is worth 84 quadrillion. All the Buddhas of his will have provided for me. If there is someone in the future who can recite this scripture, then the merit gained will not be worth 1 quadrillion of the merit gained by all the Buddhas I have provided for. Subhuti, if you are a kind man or a kind woman, you will be able to recite this scripture in the future and gain merit. If I speak of it, or if someone hears it, their heart will be in chaos and they will not believe it. Subhuti, you will know that the scripture is inconceivable and the karma is inconceivable. Buddhist rain, lotuses, golden swastikas rotated around the four people. The incantation became more and more ear-piercing, purifying the sins of knowing destiny. Ruo Shi, Jian Shui, and Ruo Shi did not notice it. However, when they saw Ning Chen bleeding from his ears, they were shocked. What happened? Amidst the Brahma rain, the cries of the phoenix rang out, and a huge shadow of the phoenix appeared. The red phoenix fire rose again, resisting the saint power of the purifying Buddha's words with all its might. The ancient city turned into a purgatory. The sound of forging iron in the blacksmith's shop, the chanting of the old monk in the ruined temple, the chanting of the old teacher in the private school. Everything turned into the Buddhist mantra, pressing down from all directions, purifying the evil of the world. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.